Chapter 19. The Black Hand. As it happened, the castle was closed to visitors on Sunday. Oliver and Clara spent some of the day rambling about the countryside and trying to clear their heads. They had been given a few helpful suggestions by the generous duo of Mrs. Kelly and Mrs. Thomas. Peel was in the middle of a productive tourist season, but they seemed to have taken an interest in Oliver and Clara's investigations. This was somewhat problematic, as Oliver and Clara couldn't be completely honest about their daily activities. So they had to set aside some time each day to create a small report of their progress. Most of the time, this meant compiling some dates and background information about the various constructions that made up the castle ruins. They could usually get all of that from their guide, Dennis. They would then share these details with Mrs. Kelly and Mrs. Thomas over dinner. Clara, with her Oxford background, was quite good at baking up historical hypotheses that were both extremely specific and terribly niche. As soon as the conversation drifted towards questions that were too uncomfortable, Clara would launch into a thesis about how the Celts had viewed St. Patrick's Isle as a sacred confluence point of gods and nature. She would toss in some details on Celtic religion she had picked up during her broader studies on Roman Britain to flesh out the thesis and generally muddy the water. By the time she arrived at her suggestion that the Celtic Druids were using the Isle as a place reserved for the most important teaching or judgment moments, she had usually lost the attention of the group, and the conversation was being steered into safer territory. These conversations weren't particularly helpful to Oliver and Clara, but they were nice distractions. The women were upbeat and positive. They clearly had a genuine affection for their little city as they enthusiastically told stories about local goings-on, past and present. As the days passed without progress, Oliver felt that their little nightly routine was keeping him going. A whole week passed in this way. Oliver and Clara would make their daily trip to the secret forge under the round tower, where they would methodically cross off the list of things that had been sent to them by Humphrey and Archibald. It was Monday, and they had been down in the forge for a few hours already. The list from Humphrey and Archibald had been short, and Oliver was just about finished with it already. They would probably be able to get out for a proper lunch if they were lucky. Oliver couldn't help thinking that the trip might have been a dead end. So far, it had been mostly wasted time. He would have to bring it up with Clara soon. They couldn't stay here forever. They might even need to go back to Oxford and help do more research in the archive. He was about to ask Clara if she had an opinion on lunch, but there was a noise above them, and excited voices came floating down to them. The voices were strange, and Oliver couldn't understand what they were saying. He was rooted to the spot, confused and surprised in equal measure. Had the entrance closed behind them, Oliver thought to himself. He couldn't remember. They were going in and out so often, he had stopped paying much attention. It could be anyone walking in on them. But why did their voices sound so different, like they were speaking another language? Oliver felt his heart beating forcefully against his chest as something horrible dawned on him. He looked wildly for Clara. "Hide!" he wanted to hiss at her, waving furiously to get her to move. But Clara was looking at the tapestries again. She had stopped in front of one Oliver had noticed before, with a figure standing atop a mountain. She didn't see Oliver waving, and there was nowhere for her to go. He hoped he was wrong, but if he wasn't, then it seemed that the Black Hand had caught up with them at last. Heavy steps echoed around the room, and Oliver remained rooted to the spot. Clara, noticing the new sounds now, turned to look at him, the look on her face showing her surprise at the sudden arrival of other people. Boots were visible on the highest stairs as Clara mouthed, "What do we do?" at Oliver. Oliver had no idea what to do as he slipped across the room towards Clara. He put his hand into his pocket and grabbed his wand. If there was a fight, he could at least try to defend them. Suddenly Clara grabbed his arm and turned him back towards the tapestry on the wall. "Follow my lead," she whispered in his ear. "Pretend we're just sightseers who happen to be in here." Oliver forced himself to stare at the wall. He saw the figure of a man standing on a hilltop, but he couldn't focus. Any moment now, surely, he expected to be cursed in the back. He could hear Clara, standing next to him, speaking in a low voice about how interesting the tapestries were and making comments about them. But he wasn't following what she was saying. She had hooked her arm through his and poked him. "Do you not think so?" Clara was saying. "Oh, yes. I quite agree," Oliver heard himself saying, though he had no idea what he had just agreed to. He was really listening to the sounds of footsteps as they reached the bottom of the stairs. Together, Oliver and Clara turned to walk along the wall as they pretended to be interested in the next tapestry hanging there. Oliver took the opportunity to look into the room at the newcomers. He saw that 3 people had come down into the forge with them. 2, a man and a woman, were meandering slowly around, examining the exterior of the room. The third, a large, squarely built man, was leaning against the wall at the base of the stairs and staring straight at Oliver and Clara. "Hello there," Clara said brightly as she pretended to notice that they were being watched. "So very interesting, but I think it is time we moved on. There is so much more to see." Clara tugged Oliver towards the stairs. Oliver's hand was still in his pocket, clutching to his wand. It felt hot and sweaty. Oliver tried to smile in a normal sort of way, but he was sure he wasn't managing to hide his anxiety. Still, for a brief moment, he thought they were going to be able to leave. They were just about to the stairs when the big square of a man stood up straight and blocked the way onto the stairs. Oliver and Clara looked at him. "Oh, excuse us. We were just going to," Clara started, but the man just slowly shook his head. He took a step forward, forcing Oliver and Clara back towards the center of the room. "I think you have something to tell us," a man's voice said from behind them, "about this place." The other man was leaning against the hearth, twirling a wand idly between his fingers. "You see, we are looking for something, and we were told it might be here." "Looking for something," Oliver said. "There is not much to see here, except a dusty old tower." "I think you are not telling me the truth," the man said. "But I am feeling patient today. I will let you try again." "What? Why would I lie to you?" Oliver asked. "I know that you would like to protect the sword," he replied in an off-handed way. "We know why you are here." Oliver gripped his wand even harder inside his pocket. "No, that cannot be right," he started to say, but suddenly there was a flash of light and he was flung backwards across the room. He crashed hard into the wall and slumped heavily to the ground. As he fell, Oliver was aware of a burning sensation in his chest. He struggled to breathe, and as he tried to groan in pain, the only sound to escape was a faint wheeze. Clara had squeaked slightly, but she remained frozen in place. The man was pointing his wand at Oliver. "I am very patient," he said as his companions nodded in agreement. "So very patient." He lowered his wand, began to twirl it in his fingers again, and turned to Clara. "So would you now like to tell me the truth?" "It is not here," Clara said. "Is it not obvious? Look around, there is nothing here." "That is not true," the man said, a hint of jest in his voice. "You are here." He paused to let that sink in before continuing, "and you have been here for many days." Clara shifted uncomfortably. "I am very patient today," the man said. "I have let you both lie to me." He raised his wand and pointed it at Clara in a quick and sudden motion. "But not again, I do not think. One more opportunity to tell me the truth or else." The man's threat was abruptly cut short by a loud bang, a bright flash of white light, and an eruption of shouting. Oliver struggled to look up, his vision slightly blurry, but he saw the bigger of the men collapse on the ground and the figure of someone else coming down the stairs, spells firing rapidly from their wand. The man who had been threatening Clara yelled wildly and began to block spells with angry slashing motions. The woman ran forward to the big man on the ground, grabbed his arm, and disapparated on the spot. Once they were gone, the remaining man let out a laugh and disapparated as well, leaving a sudden silence in his wake. "Are you all right?" the newcomer asked, rushing down the last of the stairs. But Oliver couldn't see. He still felt like he couldn't breathe, and the burning in his chest was worse than ever. He could feel Clara's hand on his shoulder, hear her voice in his ear, but he couldn't understand what she was saying. Something was wrong. He had to tell Clara something was wrong, they needed help, but he couldn't. He couldn't see. He couldn't get the words out. He couldn't breathe. Chapter 20. The Hospital and the Healer. "Hello, Oliver," said a friendly voice. That was touch and go for a minute. Oliver could feel the stones beneath him. His chest was painful, but he was keenly aware of his chest rising and falling with each breath. He opened his eyes. "Dennis," he said with surprise, looking into the face of their tour guide. Oliver tried to sit up, but found that he couldn't do it. He felt like he couldn't make his body move. "You cannot sit up yet?" Dennis asked, his voice light and conversational. "That is an interesting development." "I do not understand," Oliver said weakly. "What is happening?" "Oliver, it was Dennis who came down the stairs," Clara said, appearing above Oliver, opposite Dennis. "He drove those three others off and then rushed over to you. You were just lying there, and he took one look and started chanting in some other language, and then you started to breathe again." "Yes, it was fortunate I followed those three in here and was able to intervene when I did," Dennis said. "I do not think many healers would have had the skill required to treat you." "Thank you," Oliver said. He was feeling a little better. "It feels like I cannot control my body. What has happened to me?" "You were attacked with a very unfriendly curse," Dennis said. "Do you still feel any burning or pressure in your chest?" "Oh," Oliver said, realizing for the first time that the burning sensation had gone. "No, I do not feel either of those anymore. What was that spell?" "I dare say you would not have learnt it in school," Dennis explained, "but we do not all share the same upbringing. It would have killed you eventually without the proper intervention." "But I am not going to die now, right?" Oliver asked, his voice cracking slightly. "No, although you will need further treatments before you make a full recovery," Dennis replied. "How did you know what to do?" Clara interrupted. "Well, this isle has exceptional healers," Dennis said. "It has always been that way for as long as the isle has been inhabited. The witches and wizards here study and practice it from the time we are children. It is our school." "Your school," Clara repeated. "Oh, yes," Dennis continued. "Our children remain here to learn and preserve our healing magic. They do not travel abroad to other schools of magic as other children do." "What do you mean, further treatments?" Oliver asked. "Well, as you do not seem to be able to sit up yet," Dennis explained, "you will need additional care to remove the full effects of the spell." Oliver tried again to sit up. He felt his midsection twitch, and his legs bounced slightly off the floor. "Oh, good," Dennis said, pointing at the movement. "That was a very good effort, but do not strain yourself too much yet. You will be making progress soon enough." Oliver sighed. With everything that was going on, he didn't think they had time to wait for him to get better. They needed to figure out what this forge was hiding from them. Now they knew the Black Hand was here. Dennis was still talking. "The first thing will be to take you somewhere more comfortable and more safe. I should think that my home will adequately serve for both purposes. Then, of course, you will need to tell me who those people were and why they were attacking you. And perhaps you would also explain what is this room." Oliver was unsure how Dennis was going to get him out of the forge, but Dennis seemed very unconcerned. A sense of calmness radiated from him that made Oliver feel very much at ease, despite his situation. He figured there would be time later to ask Dennis why a healer was giving tour around some castle ruins. Dennis even seemed to be unaware of the magical connection to the castle. Dennis conjured a litter and placed it next to Oliver. He and Clara then rolled Oliver up onto his side while the litter slid underneath him. As they rolled Oliver back down, he settled comfortably into the canvas. Dennis then ordered the litter to rise, and it floated with Oliver on it at about waist height. Dennis then put one hand on the litter, offered the other to Clara, and disapparated with them all. Oliver opened his eyes on a grassy plain overlooking a seaside cliff. A large house stood a short distance away. He stared into the sky as fluffy white clouds floated overhead, inhaled the sea air, and felt the wind on his face. After spending so many days sequestered in that stone room, and then having been attacked there, Oliver found himself suddenly grateful for the sun and the wind and the smell of the air. Dennis began to stroll towards the house. The litter carrying Oliver floated along at his side, following him exactly. Clara was walking along on Dennis's other side, and they were talking, but Oliver wasn't really paying attention. He occasionally heard a few words. It sounded like they were making dinner plans. They reached the front door, and Dennis let them in. The litter floated inside into a large open hall before turning to the left and passing through a doorway. It led to a long room that looked like a hospital ward. Rows of beds with clean white sheets were arrayed down the length of the room. The litter floated along, chose one facing a window, and settled down on top of it. Once it had done that, the litter vanished, leaving Oliver comfortably on top of the bed. Dennis and Clara had followed the litter into the ward. Clara sat down on a chair next to Oliver's bed, while Dennis stopped to look through a cabinet. Oliver took in the room. It felt very neat and clean. There was a feeling of light and warmth and comfort in the room. "Dennis?" Oliver asked. Dennis responded, as he continued pulling items from the cabinet. "Would it be all right if one of you helped me remove my shoes and maybe my coat?" Oliver asked. "Oh, certainly," Dennis said. Clara jumped out of her chair to help, but she wore an uncomfortable expression as she helped pull Oliver's arms out of his jacket sleeves. For his part, Oliver wasn't terribly enthusiastic about the situation. He felt helpless, and it made him feel ashamed. He had been utterly unable to protect himself or Clara. They both could have been killed in the forge, and there was nothing he could do about it. And now, to top it all off, he was completely unable to take his own coat and shoes off. Dennis moved off to another part of the room. Oliver could hear the soft sounds of glass clinking, the grinding of a mortar and pestle, and the rhythmic sound of chopping. "Clara," he said, "I am sorry. I did not." He trailed off. He didn't know what to say. "I know," she said. "We both knew they could catch up to us. They caught us by surprise this time." "I was never great at dueling," Oliver said. "We should have never come here, or we should have left days ago. We were too exposed out here by ourselves, and I could not protect you. I never thought this would put you in real danger." Clara said nothing. She put her hand on Oliver's arm and let it rest there a minute. Finally, she said, "It is not your fault. We did what we thought was right. We both made our own choices." Oliver wanted to say something else, but the words wouldn't come. He felt drained, but it had nothing to do with the curse. Dennis reappeared with a smile, putting an end to the conversation. He held out a small cup. "This is the first of the potions I want you to take," he said. "It will start your healing process." He then lifted Oliver's head gently and put the cup to his lips so Oliver could drink it. It tasted bitter, but otherwise wasn't too bad. "Very good," Dennis said. "Now, that will take a little while to take effect. When it does, I believe you will find yourself able to change into these." He held up a set of pajamas for Oliver to see and placed them on a bedside table. "You may not feel up to walking, so I will leave a curtain here for you. It will give you some privacy when you are ready." As Dennis said that, a set of hospital curtains moved across the room and settled near the top of Oliver's bed. "I need to start brewing the rest of the potion you will need to take," Dennis continued. "Clara, I have a room for you as well, if you would like to follow me. We can check back in on our patient in a few hours." Clara gave Oliver an awkward sort of pat on the shoulder and followed Dennis out of the ward. Oliver wasn't sure how long he laid on the bed, but very gradually he felt his body starting to respond. At first he found he could flex his hands, then his arms, and then finally, after a little struggling, he was able to sit up. He was able to reach the pajamas and grab them from the bedside table, but he was struggling with the buttons. It was awkward and uncomfortable, and Oliver was glad nobody was there to watch him. He didn't feel up to standing yet, and he was sure he wasn't going to be able to move the screen curtain around his bed. He wanted to get to his wand, but it was still in his coat, and Dennis had hung it up across the room. After some anxiety-ridden moments, Oliver decided he didn't want to put it off any longer, and he would try to get into the pajamas. Just as he reached that conclusion, the curtain swung round on its own to screen him from the rest of the room. It was just as well, as it took Oliver a long time to change. He struggled to lift his legs so he could slide the pajama bottoms on, and he still lacked the dexterity to manipulate the buttons on his shirt. It was a frustrating process, especially after he discovered he'd gotten a button into the wrong hole on the pajama shirt. It was a little mistake, one that normally wouldn't have given him even a moment's pause, but now it made him feel defeated. He wanted to weep in frustration, but he persevered. It felt like a very long time until he was dressed and settled into bed. It was only as he was settling in that Oliver began to realize just how comfortable the bed was and how very tired he felt. As he sunk deeper and deeper into the bedding, it was hard to imagine that it wasn't that long ago that he was laying on a stone floor, suffering that burning in his chest. It was hard to think that he had been dying, that he would have died if Dennis hadn't arrived when he did. Oliver woke the next morning as sun streamed in through the windows. He tried sitting up again and found that he was able to manage it easier than he had done the day before. He sat in silence in the early morning light and took in the sight of the hospital ward and its neat rows of beds. The room smelled clean and fresh. Altogether, it was a very pleasant place to be. After a while, Dennis came in. "Oh, good, you are awake. You were out for nearly 15 hours. How do you feel?" "I am a little better," Oliver responded. "It was easier to sit up this morning." "That is good," Dennis said. "By the end of today, you should be able to walk around the house." He offered another goblet of the bitter potion to Oliver. "You will feel hungry soon, so once you have finished your potion, we can go to the dining room." Oliver took the goblet in both hands. They still felt clumsy, like they weren't connected properly to the rest of his body, but he didn't spill anything from the goblet. He was relieved to be able to complete so simple a task. It felt silly, but last night he would not have been able to manage it. "Thank you," Oliver said. "What is this?" "This is a potion of my own invention," Dennis said. "I have never given it a name, but it has a wide variety of healing uses. The principal ingredients are dittany, a bezoar, murtlap tentacles, manx gorse, and exactly 6 crowberries. I am really pleased at how well you are responding to it. From your condition yesterday, I did not expect you to be as able as you are proving to be today." "Oh," Oliver said, feeling his spirits rise a little. "That is good then." "Indeed," Dennis replied. "Now I think it is just about time for you to answer some of my questions." He placed some fresh clothes on the bedside table. "Dress, and we will converse over a good meal." The curtain sprang around to shield Oliver from view, just as it had done the night before. Oliver managed to change more easily this time. The fresh shirt and trousers were soft and comfortable, and once Oliver had managed to get everything on, he sat up and swung his legs over the side of the bed. As he did, the curtain opened back up. "Well done," Dennis said. He pulled his wand and conjured a chair next to the bed. The chair was wooden, straight-backed, had low arm rests, and rested on 3 wheels. There were 2 large wheels on the sides, and one smaller wheel set a little behind the chair. Oliver looked at the chair curiously. "What is that chair?" he asked. "This is a rolling chair," Dennis explained. "I once saw a muggle using one. They are quite practical, as you will see." Dennis stood at Oliver's side, and putting Oliver's arm over his shoulder, he lifted Oliver off the bed into a standing position. Oliver strained his whole body to stand, leaning heavily on Dennis, but almost immediately the chair had swung round and rolled into the back of Oliver's knees. Oliver's legs buckled, and Dennis helped him fall gently into the chair. Dennis waved his wand at the chair, and a flat board slid under Oliver's feet, and lifted them off the floor. Waving his wand once more, the chair set off into the house with Dennis following behind it. "Your friends will, of course, be very pleased with your recovery," Dennis said casually, as they meandered through wood-paneled corridors. "Yes," Oliver said somewhat noncommittally. He was still feeling guilty that he hadn't done a better job of protecting Clara or himself. He was going to recover, but he had really let everyone down. They hadn't found the secret of the forge. They had lingered too long, and that had made them vulnerable. It was a mistake that had almost cost them both their lives. He would have certainly died if Dennis hadn't shown up. If Dennis hadn't known the counter-curse, or if he wasn't such a talented healer, or if he'd been a few moments later, or if he hadn't caught the Black Hand by surprise and been able to chase them off, Oliver would have surely died. He had probably only been a few seconds away from it. If Oliver had died, what would the Black Hand have done to Clara? Surely they wouldn't have let her leave to tell the truth of what had happened. Captivity or death. Oliver would have left her to captivity or death. Here and their portraits looked down on him as they passed. Oliver was slumped over, lost in his thoughts. Most of the occupants were silent, but one or two offered words of advice on the treatment of different magical maladies. "You must make the patient walk if he is to recover properly from an attack of the Arge." One stern-looking old wizard barked down at them. "The patient clearly has an attack of the mumble mumps," quipped another. "I recommend bed rest and cold compresses." "They are not always so helpful," Dennis said, with a note of jest in his voice. "They must like you." Oliver actually cracked a smile as they passed under the portrait of a witch who yelled out, "Sit up straight. Good posture is the backbone of good health." It was hard for him to shake the feeling of misery that seemed to hang on his shoulders, though. He struggled with his thoughts the rest of the way through the house, and barely noticed when they rolled into a large room. "Oliver," a voice brought Oliver's attention back to the house. The sun streamed through high windows, making the room feel cheerful and bright. There was a large, round wooden dining table set on a large, decorative rug. Oliver could now feel the rug grabbing slightly at the wheels of his chair as they sunk into it. Looking for the source of the voice, Oliver suddenly became aware of a couple of figures hustling over to him. "Humphrey, Archibald," Oliver stuttered. "What are you doing here?" "Manners, my boy," Humphrey said, putting a hand on Oliver's shoulder. "Do you think we would abandon you in this moment of crisis?" "What else could we have done?" Archibald added. "Clara wrote to us last night, of course. We disapparated as soon as we knew where to find you. Of course, your talented healer Dennis would not allow Humphrey to disturb you last night, but we have been here nonetheless." "I am sorry," Oliver started. "Stop that," Humphrey interrupted. "You are not culpable for any of this. We are just happy that you are going to recover fully." "I think we should sit down and eat," Dennis interrupted. "There will be plenty of time to discuss yesterday's events." The chair wheeled Oliver over to the table. As he looked around, he was surprised to see the friendly, smiling face of Mrs. Thomas. "Good morning, dear," she said. "I hope you were reasonably comfortable last night." "Oh, yes," Oliver managed to respond. "The bed is very good." "You need not ask," Mrs. Thomas said. "Dennis is my son. Once he was ready to take over as the head healer here, I retired to work in the kitchen of my old friend Mrs. Kelly. Cooking has always been a passion for me, and it is so much more satisfying to do it without magic. It is very much like potion making. You know, precision, attention to detail, and a measured dash of creativity often prove to be the most important components to success. I had suspicions about you from the night we met, so I arranged for Dennis to meet you at the castle," she continued. "The magical community here is small, and we do not always have many patients. Dennis works at the castle in his free time." Dennis was sitting down and nodding. "I always enjoyed my visits to the castle as a young boy. I enjoy giving tour, though I am afraid I am not the most talented tour guide." "Dennis has been keeping an eye on you, which was fortunate," Mrs. Thomas continued. "Of course, he sent me an owl last night to let me know what had happened. I made all the arrangements with Mrs. Kelly, so you need not worry about your rooms there. I brought all of your belongings over with me last night. That was very kind, Oliver said. Thank you. A house elf came around and bustled around the table, setting out plates and silverware. Excuse me, he squeaked gently as he set each table setting. You are welcome, Mrs. Thomas said with a little bow. She turned to the house elf as he reached her place. Wabi, would you ask Biddy to kindly rouse our other guests? I do not think we should begin without them. Of course, madam, Wabi said with a bow. He finished placing the last setting and disappeared from the room. Oliver looked around the room. Where is Clara? He asked. Likely still asleep, I should imagine, Humphrey said. She stayed up into the early hours this morning talking us through what happened in the forge. Something must have shown on Oliver's face, because Humphrey quickly continued. She was eager to talk about it. She wanted us to know everything about how the two of you were attacked. Eventually, we convinced her to take a sleeping draught and go to bed, though. This news made Oliver feel even worse. What was Clara thinking? How was she feeling? They had been in real danger, and she had been helpless. A noise on the other end of the room made Oliver look up. A figure was emerging from one of the corridors that led to the dining room, but to his surprise, it wasn't Clara. It was Boudica. What are you doing here? Oliver asked. Boudica looked a little disheveled and was rubbing sleep from her eyes. She yawned loudly before answering. I got the order to come and help out around 3:30 this morning. Humphrey reported the attack on you to the ministry, and I happened to already be on an assignment at the time. We had a report of an unauthorized portkey to the north of Norwich. It turned out to be nothing more than a brainless country farmer type who had a few too many to drink and was trying to get to the next pub. She pulled up a chair near Oliver and sat down at the table. What a moron! He had managed to turn one of his empties into a portkey, but could not figure out which one it was. Davies happened to pick it up. Next thing he knew, he was standing at the front door, exactly 3 feet to the left of where he had just been. What a wooden spoon he is. Could not even manage to get the destination right. Normally, that would be a job for magical law enforcement, and the Auror office would not get involved. She yawned loudly again. Anyway, I am here to make sure you do not do anything daft. I reported the attack to the ministry, Humphrey said. As you know, we have been reporting your progress to the ministry regularly ever since we decided to send you here. I sent word to the ministry as soon as Clara's message reached us. As you can see, it took some time for the message to make it all the way through to the Auror office. It was a wasted opportunity, Archibald said. The Auror office should have been out searching the area immediately. They would have found nothing, Dennis interjected. The attackers were gone well before you had even been contacted. They were not foolish enough to wait around to be caught. Quick footsteps on the floor of the corridor announced the arrival of Clara at that moment. Her face showed no trace of the tiredness that Boudica's had. Oh, good. Look at you, Oliver. How are you feeling? I am fine, Oliver lied. On the mend, and I will shortly be back to normal. Was this a common cold? He was getting better, but it would be hard to feel normal. Most of my extremities are even working now. He heard himself joking as he waved his arms feebly. This got some laughs around the table. Oliver has responded very well to the treatment, Dennis said. I think by tonight he will be ready to walk around a little bit. A little patience, and I will have him back to you as good as new. Another house elf appeared in the room. Are you ready for the meal now, madam? She asked to Mrs. Thomas. Yes, Biddy, thank you, Mrs. Thomas responded. She gestured to an open seat at her side. Have a seat, Clara, dear. Clara walked around the table to take her seat, and Wabi reappeared with trays of food suspended in front of him. Biddy followed a moment later, and together they laid out the table. There was a bustle of activity and conversation as everyone began serving themselves. Oliver sat awkwardly. He tried to spear a sausage, but missed. Then he had trouble holding onto a serving spoon while reaching for some roasted vegetables. Nobody seemed to notice, but Wabi appeared at his side. Would Master Oliver like some assistance? The elf suggested gently. Oh, no, Oliver said, embarrassed. He reached out again with the spoon. I can manage. Of course, Master Oliver. Wabi is here to help all of the patients. Sometimes their sicknesses or injuries bring them down, but with help, everyone can get back up. The little house elf gave a short bow and moved away around the table. Oliver watched the elf and then tried again with the vegetables. This time he managed to get 2 slices of tomato and some onion. I wonder, Dennis said, as everyone began to settle down to their meal, if you would be willing to answer some questions for me. He wasn't talking to anyone directly, but he glanced around the room at his guests. I suppose it would be fair, Humphrey said. After all, you have helped us immensely. I know that you work for the Ministry of Magic, Dennis started, but why are you here? Who are those people that attacked Oliver and Clara? Why did they do it? Ah, I do not know how much I can tell you about that, Humphrey started. It is a matter of the highest government secrecy. Tell them everything, Humphrey, Oliver interrupted. He was tired of hiding the truth from people who were helping him. They can know. As you wish, Humphrey said. However, it is a matter of utmost secrecy, and I must implore you to tell no one else. He looked at Dennis and Mrs. Thomas, who both nodded in agreement. Humphrey then launched into a complete retelling of everything that had happened until then. Everyone listened with rapt attention as he explained about the Black Hand and the global repercussions their actions could have. He recounted the reasoning that had taken him and Oliver to the archive to work with Archibald, and how Oliver had been sent out to hunt down artifacts from the time of Arthur. Clara contributed a few details from their early adventures after Oliver had persuaded her to help, and Humphrey explained, in detail, how he and Archibald had deduced that Oliver and Clara should investigate the ruins at Peel. Once he finished, the room was quiet, and Dennis looked thoughtful. So then, tell me how you found that room. He looked more at Oliver this time. Oliver explained how he and Clara had been convinced that there was something at Peel for them to find. He told Dennis about the ruins of the Spewit Vane Chapel and how they had pieced together that there should be something under the round tower. You helped us confirm that there was something under it, he said to Dennis. It was difficult, though, to find the rune on the floor that marked the entrance. It could have been any other scratch mark. Dennis shook his head. And how did you get in? Was it a password? Oliver was confused. No, I simply used it and the stairs appeared below us. Are you saying that the forge was unknown to you? Oh yes, completely unknown, Dennis said. There are stories, of course, about different things happening here, but that room, a forge, you say? Well, that was completely unknown to us. We never managed to work out the secret, though, Oliver said glumly. If there is any clue there about Excalibur or any other Arthurian artifact, we have not been able to discover it. Do not trouble yourself on that, young man, Archibald said. You and Clara have done incredibly well thus far. Focus on your recovery. Humphrey and I will work the problem now. Oh, yes, Humphrey said. We intend to stay here with you for the next little while. The Aura Longwood will meet us here tomorrow to help keep us safe while we are investigating. And of course, we would appreciate the company of your talented healer and historical guide whenever your convalescence schedule permits. Oliver spent the rest of the day with Dennis. There were more doses of potion to drink, and slowly Oliver felt his strength and coordination beginning to return. By mid-afternoon, he could stand unsupported, and by the evening time, he was walking unsteadily around his bed. Boudica had decided to come watch for his first steps. She had come fully prepared with a banner depicting Oliver's face on the body of an infant. She cheered and clapped as Oliver took each stumbling step. Oliver wasn't sure if he appreciated it or not. He never considered that he would have to relearn how to walk. The next days were frustrating for Oliver. His coordination returned more slowly. He struggled to write, and buttons still gave him trouble. Just about the only positive for him was that he was able to walk further and further distances. At first it was just around his ward, but by Friday morning he was able to walk all the way to breakfast in the dining room. This feat was met with a rousing hip hooray by Humphrey and Archibald. Boudica had pretended to burst into tears and had actually pinned a bottle cap to Oliver's shirt like a battle medal. This had received uproarious laughter from the rest of the group. The only other interesting interaction was when Longwood dropped by Oliver's bedside to interview him. He asked for specific details from the attack, and Oliver did his best to relate every detail he could remember. Longwood made special notes as Oliver tried to describe the witches and wizards he and Clara had encountered in the forge. Archibald, meanwhile, had found Clara's talents for research too useful to allow her to sit idly by, so he had sequestered her to a study room. He had arranged a load of materials from the archive to be delivered, and she was painstakingly reading through it. Humphrey and Archibald were dividing time between the forge and the study room with Clara. As one week ended and the other began, however, they were no closer to learning the forge's secrets than Oliver and Clara had been. Chapter 21. Recovery. Oliver was feeling utterly dispirited as he walked to breakfast the following Thursday. A whole week had passed by, and the only significant progress had been on Wednesday afternoon when he had successfully walked up and down a single flight of stairs. Boudica had given him a ribbon for this. Clara was sitting at the table already, munching on some toast. "Good morning," she said as Oliver sat down. "How are you today?" "Fine," Oliver lied. It was getting easier to lie to everyone. "I think Dennis has me walking up and down the stairs all morning, so all in all it does not seem to be a very challenging day for me." Clara smiled. "Good, you will need the practice. Archibald has me working on a next location for us. Hopefully soon we will be on the move again. I just do not know what I should be looking for." "Maybe in the end, someone did actually throw that sword into a lake," Oliver suggested. "Ha ha," Clara replied sarcastically. "You really think I had not already thought of that? I have a list of at least 18 lakes, larks, and ponds we could go check." "Maybe I am not needed after all," Oliver said, putting on a face of mock surprise. "You are not needed at all," Boudica said, sitting down next to him, "except of course to pass the eggs. Would you please?" "Very amusing," Oliver said, passing the tray to her with shaky hands. "Face it, Oliver," Boudica said while choosing a soft boiled egg. "Clara is smarter than you, funnier than you, and she can walk further than you. I am reasonably sure that Humphrey is ready to offer her your job if Archibald does not offer her one first. You do not stand a chance." Clara was blushing. "Oh, that is not true," she said. "When this is over, I am sure I will have to go back to my old life, forever a student and a library aide. Maybe one day they will actually allow me to graduate." Oliver felt a little ashamed. He didn't know what would happen to Clara when this was all over. He wasn't sure how much Humphrey had told the ministry about Clara's involvement. There was a good chance that they would want to obliviate her when it was over. It didn't seem fair. "Chin up," Boudica said cheerily. "I will come visit you, but you might have to teach me to read." Clara looked bewildered. "You do not know." "She knows how to read," Oliver interjected a little more grumpily than he intended. "Boudica, do you not have anything better to do this morning?" Boudica pretended to look thoughtful before saying, "No." "Well then," Oliver said, standing up, "I had better go get started with Dennis. If I am going to suffer all morning, it might as well be worth something." Oliver spent the rest of his morning with Dennis walking up and down a staircase and doing other exercises. They worked on the dexterity in Oliver's hands, the range of motion of his joints, and the strength of his muscles. It was exhausting and frustrating. Oliver had been improving, but when he found himself unable to lift a heavy book onto a shelf over his head, he was nearly ready to give up. "I cannot do this," he said to Dennis. "I am not getting better." "I know it is hard and frustrating," Dennis said, "but I promise you that you are making progress." "I cannot see it," Oliver said. "I can," Dennis said, "and so can everyone else. Can you trust in that? I suppose, Oliver said, feeling unconvinced. In the afternoon, Oliver found he had some free time. Dennis had gone down to the forge with Humphrey and Archibald, so Oliver was left alone. Feeling dispirited but rebellious, he decided to do something he hadn't done yet: leave the house. The grounds outside the house were beautiful, but Oliver didn't really notice. He wanted to be alone. He was feeling inadequate. What was the point of him now? If Humphrey and Archibald had come out here to investigate personally, what was he needed for? If Clara could do all the research and accompany them, where did that leave him? Surely they didn't really need him anymore. Whatever Dennis was saying, Oliver didn't feel that he was getting any better. Every day felt the same now. He wasn't strong enough to travel, he wasn't strong enough to explore, he wasn't even strong enough to put books on a shelf. He was a liability. Oliver found a bench near the house overlooking the sea and sat down. The walking made him tired. It was embarrassing and infuriating. He saw a small rock in the grass a little ways in front of him and pulled out his wand. He was just realizing that he hadn't tried to perform any magic since the attack. He pointed his wand at the stone, gave a textbook swish and flick with his wand, and said, "Wingardium Leviosa." The stone quivered and then settled back down into the grass. "Lumos," Oliver said, staring at the tip of his wand. There was a feeble light for a moment, but it wavered briefly before going out. Oliver threw his wand at his feet and put his face in his hands. He felt himself losing control. He couldn't do anything. He wasn't worth anything. He was sobbing into his hands. "That is quite the view," came Boudica's voice from next to him. Oliver looked up quickly. She had sat down on the bench next to him without him noticing. She wasn't looking at him, just staring out at the water. Oliver made to stand up, but Boudica put a hand on his elbow and held him there. "Stay," she said. "I want to talk to you." "Stop it," Oliver spat out. "I do not want any more of your medals or ribbons or your false praise. I am done." "None of that was false," Boudica said quietly. "That was real as it gets." "Stop it," Oliver said louder now. "You don't know anything about it. I am not getting better." "I understand," Boudica said. "It is very frustrating." "You understand," Oliver said with indignation. "You understand nothing. You have no idea what it is like. To not be able to dress yourself properly, or walk around, or pick up your bag, or write a letter, or cast a simple spell." "Did you know that I have a reserved bed at St. Mungo's?" Boudica asked, breaking Oliver's train of thought. "A what?" Oliver said, confused. "Yeah, it is reserved for me all of the time. All of the auras on my team have one. They are all in a shared room, a special ward," she continued. "You see, auras get hurt. A lot. Do you know how often I have used my bed?" "What are you talking about?" Oliver said. "I use my bed so often that I just keep a drawer of clean laundry there," Boudica plowed on. "Most of my team are the same way. Their beds are extensions of their homes. They keep photos, clean clothes, and books to read while they recover in their bedside tables. Almost everyone has decorated the walls above their beds. Oliver, I am there often enough to tell you that Longwood has a hand-drawn poster of the Appleby arrows above his bed. Longwood is not a good artist, but I can tell you that there are 224 individual arrows on the poster, raining down on a very bad depiction of Nugent Potts." "So what?" Oliver said. "So, I know what it feels like to get hurt. I know what it feels like to find yourself in hospital. I know what it feels like to feel the doubt in the back of your mind that you will never be the same again," Boudica said forcefully. Oliver sat in silence. He didn't want to have this conversation. Boudica didn't know. It wasn't the same. "Look, Oliver, usually there are a few of us in St. Mungo's together. It can get really hard, because sometimes one of you is hurt really badly and the others not so much." Boudica started to breathe deeply with emotion. Oliver had never seen that from her before. "It gets hard to deal with because you have to care about these people," she said heavily. "You spend a lot of time with them, you trust your life to them, and they trust theirs to you. Nobody wants to let anyone else down. When we are in there together, we have to deal with it. We have to deal with the uncertainty of it all. Will we get better? Will we be okay the next time we go out? Will my friend in the next bed over make it through the night? She paused. You deal with it, or it destroys you. Oliver didn't say anything. He just stared down past his stupid, useless hands resting on his stupid, useless knees, and into the grass where his stupid, useless wand was laying. We have learned to cope through humor, Boudica went on. We mock each other and make light of our injuries. It keeps us going. It reminds us that there is still a life to live out there. It reminds us that someone wants to see us succeed, even if they laugh the hardest when we fall over. I know you think they are just rubbish, but the medal and ribbon I gave you were given to me the last couple of times I was at St. Mungo's. For one, I was cursed with a strange curse that made my wand arm tiny. My hand was so small I might not have been able to hold a pin like a wand. It took weeks before the healers were able to reverse it. By then the muscles had started to waste away, and I had to relearn how to use my arm and hand. Some things about it are still not quite right. Look, see how it is a little shorter than my other arm. I got the bottle cap medal for that one. And the ribbon, Oliver heard himself ask. Ribbons are low-stakes awards, Boudica said casually. I got impaled with fire poker here. She pointed to a spot in her stomach. It was really painful, but much easier for the healers to fix, which is why I only got the ribbon. Boudica let them sit in silence for a minute. Listen, Oliver, I spoke with Dennis. He thought you would not be able to walk to this bench until Sunday. Dennis is the best healer I have ever seen. You proved him wrong, easily. You are getting better physically. It is not your body that is holding you back. I know, Oliver said. Were you watching earlier? Naturally, Boudica responded. I would not be very good at my job if I let you wander off alone at any moment. Why did my spells not work? Oliver asked. He felt like a child, vulnerable, naive, and silly. The mental and emotional recovery from something like this is the hardest part, Boudica said, touching her head and her heart. The first time I was hurt on an assignment, I was stuck in the ward at St. Mungo's for 2 months. It was hard on me. I lost my confidence, and it felt like my magic was blocked up. I could not levitate a feather if it came out of my pillow. There was an older aura then, named Ames, who was with me for a while. He sat down with me and talked to me like I am doing to you. He helped me confront what I was afraid of. He helped me sort through everything I was feeling and realize it was okay to feel. I did not need to feel ashamed or inadequate because of my fears or what had happened to me. It was okay to feel pain and fear. My teammates were supporting me, and they had my back every step of the way. Boudica sniffed softly and dabbed at the corners of her eyes. Now, Oliver, what are you afraid of? Oliver could not have imagined this moment. He sat on that bench overlooking the sea and unloaded his soul to his friend. He told her about his fears, with how close to death he had been, about how he had nearly led Clara to her death as well, how ashamed he was at not having done better, and how little he felt he was worth to the group. When he finished, he sat in silence. Just having said it out loud to someone, he felt like a weight was lifting out of his chest. He looked at Boudica. Am I wrong, he asked, about any of it? No, she said, and yes. What? I do not understand, Oliver said. You are not wrong about your fears, Boudica said. They are valid, and it is healthy to have them. I would be more worried if you did not. Without fear, we would jump off of high cliffs or swim too far into the ocean or run recklessly into every inferno. Fear, properly managed, does not stop us swimming in the ocean. It just keeps us close enough to shore. That was one of Ames's lessons. It is okay to be afraid, but you must remember that you are not ruled by fear. You are the master of yourself. And what about the other part that you said I was wrong about? Well, Boudica said, frankly, you could not be more wrong about what you are worth to us. You have never been this wrong on anything in your entire life, even when you tried to get me to study in the library with you over the Christmas break during our 4th year. Oliver chuckled. "Sorry about that," he said. "Sorry," Boudica exclaimed. "You were trying to push Newt-level work on me in our 4th year over Christmas, and now you want to apologize. Pathetic." "Maybe I should have given you a ribbon for it," Oliver said. "Oh, that would have been medal-worthy at least." Oliver smiled a genuine smile. "Boudica, what happened with you and Ames? As you recovered, I mean." Boudica closed her eyes and was quiet for a moment. "On the day I was released from St. Mungo's, Ames gave me this." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a child's button. It was maroon with a large yellow number 1 on it. It was the highest honor he could bestow on me. And I keep it with me all the time to remind myself of what I went through and what I am capable of. "And what happened to Ames then?" Oliver asked. "He died," Boudica said, 2 days after I was released and went back to work. The healers never did figure out what was happening to him." "I am sorry," Oliver said quietly. He wasn't smiling anymore. "That is the thing," Boudica said. "Ames stopped an entire gang the night he was cursed. They had been organizing for months. They had plans that were going to hurt a lot of people, and Ames stopped that. He put them in Azkaban. He was never sorry about it." The pair sat in silence again, listening to the sounds of the wind and water. Oliver reflected on what Boudica had said. He was still scared and unsure, but maybe he could commit to trying again. Ames was never sorry about it. Oliver wasn't there, not yet. Maybe he would get there. But at least he had a second chance. He reached down and picked up his wand from the grass. "Lumos." He said it strongly this time, and the tip of his wand burst into light. "First-year magic," Boudica said next to him, and Oliver grinned. He was feeling so relieved at having finally shared his fears and doubts. He had someone now who understood him. Nothing had changed, not really. Oliver still had a lot of work to do to heal and recover, but he felt a lightness and swelling of emotion in his chest. Everything had changed, and there was a reason to look forward again. Across the grass bursting from the house, Oliver could see a figure running towards them. It was the aged archivist Archibald, limbs flailing, running as hard as his ancient knees would carry him. It was an absurd spectacle, almost comical, as he huffed and puffed his way along. As Archibald grew closer, Oliver could see a serious and concerned look on his face. "I am not sure I like the look of this," Boudica said. "What is happening?" Oliver asked when Archibald arrived. "Just received news from the ministry," Archibald wheezed and handed over a parchment to them. "Arrived by owl. The Austria-Hungarian government has given an ultimatum to the Serbian government today. Sources say it is absolutely impossible. Impossible demands. Serbia has 48 hours to accept it, to accept all of it, or Austria will declare war." Chapter 22. Back to the Forge. The house seemed to take on a new urgency that afternoon. News flowed in by bits and pieces. The Russians had appealed to the Austrians to extend the deadline. Britain had offered to mediate peace talks, yet there seemed to be little faith that any of these offers would lead anywhere. Archibald took up residence in the study with Clara. He became the main point of contact for news coming from the ministry. Clara stayed with him to help him make sense of the Muggle government. "He does not know a squith from Grey," she had told Oliver exasperatedly. This intrusion into Clara's space had another unintended effect. Clara had continued her correspondence with her family. She had realized they would be stationary for a time while Oliver recovered, so she had her uncle mail materials about his church to her. She had used her spare time to do quite a lot of work towards creating the information pamphlet her uncle needed. This helped her feel better as she could occasionally provide real updates in her letters. However, now that Archibald had joined her on a more regular basis, Clara discovered that she had far less free time than she'd had before, and that Archibald was altogether too eager to intrude on her work. "When I am not explaining the government to him, I am explaining the Church of England," she said. "He wants to review my drafts on notable events at the church, even though I sent them off to my uncle days ago. Not even my professors at Oxford would have demanded that. Despite the excitement, it seemed that war might still be avoided, according to Archibald. If common sense prevails, there should be no issue, he lectured the table over dinner. If Austria-Hungary really wants to go to war, it does not seem there is much anyone can do to stop them, Humphrey debated. They do not seem much put off by the threat of conflict with Russia. What about the ultimatum? Will Serbia not negotiate a peace from that? Of course not, came the inevitable reply. It is too severe. It is intended to be rejected. The conversation went round and round in circles. Despite all the news being fed to them from Nigel Tamblingargan, who was still embedded in the Muggle Prime Minister's office, Oliver suspected that no one knew what the next few days would bring. The following day was tense, but strangely quiet. Archibald reported, with some clarifications from Clara, that the Muggle cabinet had finally discussed the issue. There were still no reports of the crisis in any newspapers, however. Oliver began to attack his recovery with increased purpose and enthusiasm. He carried extra weights during his exercises and pushed his body to the limit at each opportunity. Dennis was impressed, but cautious. "You cannot rush your recovery, Oliver," he said that afternoon. "I know you are ready to be healed, but it will still take time." "How long?" Oliver asked. "How long until I am normal again?" "It is difficult to say, but possibly another week," Dennis suggested. "I think you will need at least one dose of the potion each day." Oliver groaned. A lot could happen in a week. As Saturday dawned, the mood around the house was glum. Without any progress the previous days, it seemed like they had failed. War would come, with or without the artifacts they hunted. Even Humphrey loafed about the house through the morning. Archibald appeared around lunchtime with a new bulletin. "The Serbians are going to accept the ultimatum," he read aloud. The group leaned in expectantly, a ripple of energy going around the room. There may still be negotiations on some of the points, but the response should be satisfactory to avoid open hostilities. However, Serbia is ordering the general mobilization of all its armies, and Russia will mobilize a portion of its armies. He paused and sighed. There will be no war today. Tomorrow, though, who knows? Sunday, however, did not bring war, and Monday, too, passed without great incident. The news that came through was that additional peace plans were being proposed. According to the Muggle Liaison Office, there was a lot of diplomatic maneuvering going on between the largest of the European powers to try and avoid war, or at least prevent the spread of one. Their analysis of the situation was that most of these efforts were vain, and formal declarations of war were not far off. Clara had gone into town with Mrs. Thomas to retrieve newspapers on Monday morning. Oliver was shocked to learn that the newspapers had yet to make any meaningful report on the brewing conflict. It had been nearly a month since the assassination of the Austro-Hungarian Archduke, and most people seemed to have forgotten about the incident, if they had even been aware of it in the first place. Those days were not wasted for Oliver, though. His renewed energy seemed to be speeding up his recovery. He and Dennis had progressed to ever more challenging physical tests. Dennis set Oliver to train by running, jumping, and climbing in the mornings before working his fine motor control tests in the afternoon. Oliver practiced intricate wand movements, sewing buttons onto a jacket, and even his handwriting. He had tried to assist Clara and Archibald a few days earlier, but he struggled to hold a quill or dip it in an inkwell. His handwriting had been so poor and inconsistent that it had made his notes entirely illegible. By Monday, though, Oliver was starting to see some progress, and his old tidy script was beginning to reappear. He would practice by writing little notes, and then he would enchant them to fly off through the house. He became fond of sending little jokes to Boudica. "I am not sure I am the one who needs help with their handwriting. I suspect my hands will have to be cut off before my penmanship is as poor as yours." As Boudica was the only member of the house who was generally unoccupied, Oliver didn't feel very bad bombarding her with his notes, and he knew that she was happy to keep tabs on him after their conversation the other day. Boudica had not made much of a fuss about their conversation. She hadn't tried to bring it up with Oliver again, and as far as Oliver could tell, she hadn't discussed it with anyone else. However, Oliver was beginning to notice the patterns in her banter. The first time that Oliver had sent her a note that was completely legible, she had responded by clipping the words, "Well done for an oaf," from Thedley Prophet and pasting them onto a scrap of parchment. This was delivered with a small yellow star that appeared to be taken from a child's picture book. Boudica never failed to recognize when Oliver made progress. Each time she made a joke at his expense, Oliver knew that it really meant that he was improving. At dinner on Monday night, Dennis brought up Oliver's recovery. "I think that Oliver has progressed really well," he told the group. "I think he is ready to take on some of your work for you, and in a few more days there will be nothing left for me to do." This brought on a flurry of excitement and comments. It seemed that everyone had an idea of where Oliver could help. "I think we should all go to the forge together," Boudica said over the group. "I have never seen it, and maybe together we can get to the bottom of it. And I am sure that a few people around the table here would not mind getting out of the house for a few hours." "I second that idea," Dennis said. "As do I," Clara added. "I am certain that Archibald would not mind the change in scenery either." Archibald nodded and laughed. "It seems this plan is being forced on me," Humphrey rejoined. "Oliver, are you up to it?" "Oh, yes, of course," Oliver answered quickly. If he was honest, he felt a little nervous about going back, but he also wanted to do it. "It is settled then," Boudica said with a smile. "Mrs. Thomas, can I have more of that gravy?" The next morning, they all got up early to make their way down to town and the castle ruins. Oliver was slightly apprehensive about it. This would be a longer trip than he had yet made, but Dennis was confident all would be well. Still, Oliver wasn't sure how he would feel returning to the place where he had been attacked and cursed. There were moments when he could convince himself that it was just a room. The forge hadn't attacked him, so why should he be worried about going back there? It wasn't the room's fault about what had happened there. And yet, he was worried about reliving the experience. He could vividly remember the burning in his chest and the panic of not being able to breathe. Maybe he drew confidence from everyone else going, or maybe he was too ashamed to appear weak by backing out. But it wasn't long before Oliver found himself walking once more into the round tower. He stood off to the side as Humphrey pointed his wand at the rune and watched as the stairs appeared, descending down in the forge. Oliver hung back to let the others go in front of him until only he and Boudica remained at the top of the stairs. "After you," Boudica said, with a gesture towards the stairs. "Just watch your step. It would be really embarrassing for you if you tripped and fell in front of everyone." "Thank you for that advice," Oliver said. "If I fall down the stairs, I promise to tell everyone you pushed me." Boudica winked and gave Oliver a reassuring sort of nod. Oliver took a breath and stepped down onto the staircase. A few steps down brought Oliver below the level of the floor to where he could see the forge room below him. It looked exactly as he remembered it, except that now it was full of his friends. They were milling around, examining different features and talking amongst themselves. With Boudica close behind, Oliver went down to join them. The first task was for Oliver and Clara to recount for everyone what they had already done there. They spoke in detail about which items they had tried to investigate and which spells they had zero used. Then it was Humphrey's turn to go over his own investigation. He had done many of the same things that Oliver and Clara had done, as he tried to verify that nothing had escaped their notice. He finished by drawing attention to the pensive. "It is this most of all that perplexes me," he said. "It has no purpose in a forge except to pass along information to us who have discovered it." "Well, surely, if the pensive is here, there must be a memory to go in it," Dennis said firmly. "As you have said, what other purpose could it have here?" "That is the question," Humphrey said. "The pensive is empty, and there are no memories here. I have searched the forge thoroughly. That is not strictly true, Clara cut in. As I said to Oliver before, there are memories here. The tapestries on the walls are those memories. We cannot put the tapestries into the pensive, unfortunately, Humphrey said. They are stuck to the walls with a permanent sticking charm, and I have not been able to move them. Clara, Oliver interrupted, did you say before that you thought these tapestries were different from the others we had seen? Yes, I did, Clara said. She blushed a little. I said that they seemed to be alive to me. Even now, it is like they whisper to me from the past. Clara trailed off, embarrassed as everyone turned to look at her. Humphrey's face bore a mixture of surprise and confusion, but Archibald's face was thoughtful and rapidly was showing more and more excitement. What if, the old archivist muttered to himself, number improbable, but possible perhaps. What if? He paced up and down, muttering under his breath. Oliver watched. Humphrey had turned away and was talking to Dennis about the hearth and bellows. Quite suddenly, Archibald stopped his pacing and turned to the nearest tapestry. It depicted a witch working with a goblin on a sword. He pulled out his wand and began to trace it over the top of the scene. As he did so, a long silver thread emerged from the tapestry, being pulled out by Archibald's wand. Humphrey, he called out excitedly. Look at this, Humphrey. Humphrey turned around to see his friend finish pulling the silver thread from the tapestry and walk it over to the pensive. Archibald took his wand, and with a slight flick, the thread fell into the basin. Archibald stirred it with his wand, and suddenly two figures emerged out of the bowl. A witch and a goblin were working together at a forge. The goblin pulled a long sword from a furnace and laid it across an anvil, which seemed illuminated with a pale glow, while the witch hammered it into shape. The roar of the fire and the loud clink, clink, clink of the hammer echoed around the room. Then the figures sank back into the bowl, but they returned immediately. This time they were examining a finished sword together. It is well done, said the witch. The weight is perfectly distributed. The goblin took the sword in his hands and began to flex it, watching it return to its original shape. The heat treatment has been exceptionally successful, he said, with a note of satisfaction. Even without the extra enchantments, this would still be my best work. Yes, my friend, replied the witch. This sword will be admired and known forever. I am grateful that we have been able to collaborate on it. As the witch finished speaking, the figures sank once again into the bowl, and the forge became silent. Incredible, murmured Archibald. They wove the memories into the tapestries. Clara was right, they are the memories. My apologies for doubting you, Humphrey said, turning to face Clara. It seems everything we have been looking for has been right in front of us the entire time. Archibald began fishing the memory out of the pensive before carefully taking it back to the tapestry it had come from. As he traced his wand over the tapestry again, the memory wove itself back into the fabric, just as it had been before. He turned to the next tapestry on the wall and extracted the memory as he had done before. Archibald brought back several memories in this fashion, and they, too, showed brief scenes of a witch working in a forge. If all of these contain memories, Dennis started, slowly turning on the spot. Which memory do you need? Which one will help you find the sword? Many of these seem to depict the forging of objects, said Humphrey, looking at a tapestry near him. I think we need one that is different, he finished somewhat indecisively. Perhaps we should spread out and look for something that does not appear obviously forge-related, he suggested. The group spread out, examining the many different tapestries hanging on the walls. Oliver was shocked that neither he nor Clara nor Humphrey had committed them to memory during their days sequestered in the room. They only noticed them long enough to decide to ignore them. Oliver looked around. He really had no idea what most of these tapestries depicted. He suddenly felt that they had been very blind to not notice this earlier. He was staring at a particularly tall tapestry depicting the witch who had appeared in the pensive. She was working with two assistants in front of a large fire. Her wand appeared several times as they prepared materials and poured molds. Oliver wondered vaguely if this witch had crafted any of the other items they had found. As he was about to move on, Clara tapped him on the shoulder. "Oliver, come take a look at this," she said. She led him over to a small tapestry. "I noticed this the day the Black Hand caught us," she said, "but I had forgotten about it with everything else that was going on." Oliver looked at the depiction of a man standing atop of a mountain. There was a bright sword in his hand, and he was flanked by robed figures on either side. "I saw this as well," he said slowly. "It was before, but I forgot about it. It seemed familiar to me, but I do not know why." "Yes," Clara said. "I had the same feeling. To me, it does not seem to belong here. There is no depiction of the forge or the castle or any clear indication it depicts a scene on this island. That mountain could be anywhere." Oliver considered that thought. He supposed that if the tapestry were showing the presentation of a sword to someone, that it would have occurred near the castle that housed the forge. Yet there was no forge or castle in the scene. The mountain top could be somewhere on the isle, but it might just as likely also be anywhere else. "This one," he said loudly. "Archibald Humphrey here." The pair hurried over and stood in front of the small tapestry. Archibald took out his wand and traced over the scene. Just as before, a long silver thread emerged and dangled from his wand. Humphrey muttered to himself and pointed at different parts of the image as Archibald gently carried the memory to the pensive. With a flick it too fell into the bowl. Archibald stirred it, but this time no figures stood on its surface. This time a window appeared on the surface, and through it tiny figures could be seen moving about. "Come here, everyone," Archibald said. "Gather round, make room for everyone. There is clearly much more to this memory. On three, please place your face into the bowl. Right then. 1, 2, 3. On three, the group began moving their faces towards the bowl. Oliver closed his eyes. He expected to bump heads with someone, but he was surprised when he felt himself pitch forward. His feet left the ground and he was falling. But just as soon as he could process that, his feet had hit the ground again. It was not the hard stone floor of the forge, but a soft, grassy slope. Oliver opened his eyes and saw that he was standing just below the crown of a medium-sized hill. It was a little surprising, as the tapestry had appeared to show a larger mountain. The summit was rocky, with large boulders strewn around it. Two hooded figures stood at the top, alone. They mingled and conversed in low voices that Oliver couldn't hear, as if they were waiting for something. At a noise, Oliver turned around and saw Humphrey and the others standing nearby. Walking over, he asked, "Where are we?" "This is certainly not on the Isle of Man," Dennis said. "I have traveled the length and breadth of the isle and never seen any place such as this." "Who are they?" Clara asked. "And what is this? Was that like a portkey?" "No," Humphrey responded. "We are in a memory, watching it unfold as it actually happened." He looked around him to see if anyone else was visible. "Since no one else is here at the moment, I presume that this memory must have belonged to one of them. And since we are in a memory, I think we must follow up the question of where are we, with its logical successor, when are we?" As they watched, one of the figures, taller than the other, turned so they could see its face. "Merlin's beard," whispered Archibald. "Merlin's beard, indeed," said Humphrey, "and the rest of Merlin himself, unless I am very much mistaken." The group stood in silence, watching Merlin and the smaller hooded figure stand alone and waiting to see what the memory contained. Slowly, Oliver became aware of a low and distant rumble. It sounded like the voices and footsteps of many people carried gently on the wind. For the first time, Oliver turned his attention down the hill. He was standing next to a path that led up to where Merlin and his companion waited. Going down the hill, it led narrowly between two large and imposing stone walls before it disappeared down a crest. The noise grew in a gentle crescendo, and Oliver walked down the path to see what was causing it. Reaching the point where the path descended beyond the high stone walls, Oliver could see that it wound its way down a steep and rocky slope. At the base of the slope was a wide, flat plain. Near the base of the hill, a crowd of people had formed. Their voices carried up to Oliver more clearly now, and Oliver could see that they were slowly making their way up towards the top. "That must be what Merlin is waiting for," Oliver said to himself. He watched as the crowd climbed the path, gradually winding their way towards him. The others joined him, and together they watched the throng of people. They could hear snatches of songs and the babble of conversation. The atmosphere seemed festive and light. As the group reached the point where the path funneled into the narrow passage between the high stone walls, they suddenly became silent and somber. They marched forward in quiet expectation, advancing nearly to where Merlin stood before fanning out around him. Oliver, Clara, Humphrey, Archibald, Dennis, and Boudica followed the crowd and moved through it to stand near the middle where they could see what was happening. Once the crowd had finally all filed in, Merlin stepped forward, lowering his hood. "Come forward," he commanded in a loud voice. At this, a man emerged from the middle of the crowd. He didn't look to be much older than Oliver was, but Oliver could see lines of care and stress etched on his face. He was strong and straight-backed and carried himself with confidence and pride. He stopped in front of Merlin and bowed. "You have been chosen and anointed through your deeds and self-sacrifice," Merlin said loudly. "You have been tested and proven and found worthy of leadership. You have been an able commander, a responsible leader, and a loyal friend." Merlin paused, extending his arm to put his hand on the other man's shoulder. He looked long and hard into his face and then looked around at the crowd. "It is time," he said, "to give you the means to serve your people and to protect them from all manner of dangers. Step up and place your foot into the mark of the kings." The man walked forward onto a rounded stone that bulged out of the ground. Moving forward so he could see better, Oliver saw the outline of a foot set into the stone. The man turned to face the crowd and placed his right foot into the footstep. Then he kneeled before them all. When he had knelt down, Merlin walked a few paces to one side and conjured a simple cup. He took this cup and, bending over, dipped it in a basin carved into the rock. He brought it out again, full of water, and carried it back to the man. "Arthur, son of Uther," Merlin said, addressing the kneeling man, "do you swear to protect the people of these lands, to defend them with courage, honor, and integrity?" "I swear it," Arthur said. At this, Merlin dipped his fingers in the water and sprinkled it onto the arms of Arthur. "Do you swear to administer the affairs of this land in justice and fairness?" Merlin continued, "without cruelty and without prejudice towards any person?" "I swear it," Arthur said. Merlin dipped his fingers into the water again, this time sprinkling it onto Arthur's brow. "Do you swear to do these duties with all of your heart, mind, strength, and energy, even unto the sacrifice of your own life, and all that you possess?" "I swear it," Arthur said. Merlin dipped his fingers into the water once more, taking his hand and pressing it against Arthur's chest, directly over his heart. "Then," Merlin said loudly, "in the tradition of your people, I proclaim you king and defender of these lands." Another man hurried forward and presented a crown to Merlin. Merlin took it and showed it to the assembled crowd before placing it solemnly on Arthur's head. Then he called out again in a loud voice, "And now, to aid you in these duties, we present to you a gift." As Merlin finished speaking, the other figure stepped forward and lowered its hood. The face of a witch was revealed, one who Oliver didn't recognize. "That must be Vivian," Archibald said, pointing. As Vivian drew level with Merlin, she drew a long, gleaming sword from under her robes. It glinted brightly in the sun, and it almost seemed to Oliver that flames danced off the blade. She held it out, and with a small bow of her head, offered it to Arthur. Arthur reached out and received the sword as he too bowed his head. Then suddenly he took the hilt of the sword, and rising to his feet, he held it over his head for all to see. The crowd finally broke its silence and erupted into noise and celebration. Oliver looked across the crowd and saw that amongst the masses, here and there, were witches and wizards with their wands raised above their heads. Bright lights and swirling smoke shot out of their wands into the sky, and Oliver saw that once they had done this, the witches and wizards stowed their wands once more and turned to celebrate with their friends and neighbors. All at once, the memory began to dissolve around them, and Oliver felt himself pulled up off the ground. He felt his feet hit the hard stone floor of the forge, and lifting his head away from the bowl, Oliver looked around at the faces of his companions. "Incredible," Archibald said softly. "Just incredible. The coronation and presentation of Excalibur to King Arthur." Archibald's voice was rising with excitement. He was already a leader among his people, but that was the moment when Arthur became king. "You of course noticed the crown," Humphrey said, looking at Oliver and Clara. "It is the same one that you found and returned to us." "Of course," Clara said, nodding. "Who was that man that brought it up?" "Who knows?" Humphrey said. "He may have been anyone from the local community. The crown itself did not need any magical properties to communicate to everyone that the person who wore it was king. If anything, it may have been symbolic of Arthur's role, that he wore a crown given to him by his non-magical community, and bore a sword given to him by his magical neighbors." "I do not get it," Oliver interrupted. "We came here, we found the memory. What was it trying to tell us? Where do we go from here?" "Where indeed?" Archibald said. "It occurs to me that several of the memories we viewed dealt directly with the creation of Excalibur. Some of them even confirmed that Gladys was collaborating with goblins. I think we are meant to understand the magical provenance of the sword." "We have learned something about the creation of Excalibur," Humphrey said. "Clearly the memories we saw were left for us. They were intended to be found and to be viewed. So there must be some clue to what we should do next." "I wonder where that coronation ceremony was," Dennis mused. "Maybe you need to go there," Boudica suggested. "If you can find out where it was, that is." "Yes, I think that is probably right," Humphrey said. "The memory of the coronation was distinct from the others. It was more complete, and the only memory to not take place here in the forge. In fact, Dennis, you said that location was not even on the Isle of Man, correct?" "That is correct," Dennis said with a nod. "I know this island as well as any living soul. That hill is somewhere else." "It stands to reason," Clara said, "that if it was Arthur's coronation, and if those were people from Arthur's kingdom, then it would be somewhere in England, right?" "Perhaps," Humphrey replied. "I think that we may need a little more time to work it out. In the meantime, Dennis, Archibald, I hope you will not begrudge me taking the memory out of the forge with us. I think it best to keep it safely hidden for the time being." The local wizard and the old archivist both nodded in agreement at this. "I think we may want to look at that again," Archibald said. "There may be one or two essential details that we missed." "I am sure of it," Humphrey said, as he scooped the memory out of the pensieve with his wand and dropped it into a small glass vial he had just produced from a pocket. "For now, let us go back to the house. As we are looking for the location of Arthur's coronation, perhaps one of our records will lead us there. In any case, I can see that Oliver is beginning to look quite tired." Oliver was indeed starting to feel a wave of fatigue. He had exerted himself to venture this far away from the house, and the emotions of returning to the forge, combined with uncovering the memories, were starting to weigh on him. "I would not mind returning to the house," Oliver said with a nod. The group then filed up the stairs and out of the forge, chatting excitedly about what they had found. Slowly, they began making their way back to the house. Chapter 23, Tipping Point. When they returned back to the house, an important-looking bulletin from the ministry was waiting for them. "Austria has broken off diplomatic relations with Serbia and declared war," Archibald read aloud for the group. "The Mughal governments are now working to keep the conflict limited regionally. It is the opinion of the Mughal liaison office that these efforts will not be successful. Belgrade is likely to be attacked by the end of the day." Where the mood of the group had been excited due to their discovery at the forge, it was suddenly crushed under a sobering reality. Conflict was breaking out. They had maybe made some progress today, but they needed to remember that the object of their search might still help prevent the conflict from growing wider. Their animated chatter was replaced with somber silence, and the group went their separate ways. Oliver went back to his bed to rest. He was tired, but he wanted to think about what they had seen in the pensive. The group that had attacked him and Clara were after the sword. That much was clear. Why else would they have been at the forge? How did they even find the forge? Humphrey had taken the memory. Would that be enough to stop the Black Hand from finding the next location, hopefully the place where Excalibur was hidden? Could they afford to take the chance that the Black Hand would be flustered? Oliver wasn't sure what would happen next. They needed to figure out what to do, and they needed to do it quickly. The next 2 days, however, passed without incident. On one hand, a wider war had still not broken out, but on the other hand, they had not yet solved the mystery of the location of King Arthur's coronation from the pensive. Humphrey was very interested by a copy of the Muggle newspaper, the Daily Mirror, which arrived as part of a wider ministry report. Humphrey was confused about the paper's inclusion until he discovered that it was reporting news of the war. "Look at this," he said, pushing the paper at Archibald. "There is absolutely nothing about the war until page 3, and then they write about it as if the war will definitely be contained locally. Read here, the terrible danger that threatens Europe. They do not understand how Britain can become caught up in the conflict." Clara waved a letter around. "I asked my father if he knew anything about the conflict, and he knew nothing of it. It is not a topic of discussion in any of his academic circles." Spirits around the house were a little low. Oliver, however, had a private reason for keeping his spirits up. He had continued to recover, and Dennis had assured him that Friday would be his last day at the hospital. As Oliver rose for breakfast on that Friday, he was looking forward to the day. Dennis had arranged some tests for him to do. It would be more or less a full day's worth of magic and exercise. After needing so much help since the attack, Oliver wanted to show everyone that he was strong and fit and ready to contribute once again. Sitting down at breakfast, Oliver found Humphrey and Archibald already there. "Any luck with the memory?" he asked. "We were just speaking about that," Humphrey said. "The accounts of Arthur's coronation differ widely from each other. It has been very difficult to locate even one single probable location for us to investigate." Archibald looked grim. Oliver suspected that the archivist was unhappy at the failure of the sources to answer their questions. "I was about to propose to Archibald that we ask for a little bit of help," Humphrey said, with a sideways look. "What kind of help?" Archibald asked. "We have the sources. Who else could help us with them?" "I want to take a different line," Humphrey said cautiously. "I want to show the memory to someone. If they recognize the place, it could save us a lot of time and effort." "Who do you want to show the memory to?" Archibald asked. "Well, it would need to be someone who has traveled extensively in Britain," Humphrey said. "I think we both know someone who would be likely to know." "Oh no, not Davies," Archibald said. "Can you think of someone better?" Humphrey asked. "Or do you have a better plan?" "Who is Davies?" Oliver asked. "An old friend of ours," Humphrey said. "Davies is an adventurer, always has been. If anyone would recognize the landscape in the memory, it would be Davies." Humphrey looked over at Archibald, who sighed. "Okay," he said. "Send an owl and see if Davies will let us drop by." Humphrey stood up from the table and hurried away to send the owl. Archibald remained seated and poked his fork at a bit of scrambled egg. "You do not seem overly happy about this plan," Oliver suggested. "I am not unhappy with it," Archibald said. "But no, I am not particularly pleased about it." "May I ask why?" Oliver asked. "Are you concerned about sharing our mission with more people?" "I am not concerned about sharing our secrets with Davies," Archibald said. "Humphrey is astute enough to avoid sharing everything of real sensitivity anyway. No, Davies is trustworthy enough. Do you perhaps feel a little disappointment at not finding the answer through scholarly research? Oliver suggested. It may be something like that, Archibald said. Dennis is set to release you today, is that right? Yes, if I pass some tests today, Oliver replied. Well then, it is likely that you will meet Davies tomorrow, Archibald said. I think then you may understand somewhat of my displeasure at this plan. He stood up. Good luck today. I am planning to come and watch later. With that, Archibald, too, left the dining room. Oliver finished his own breakfast, wondering vaguely what about Davies was so off-putting to Archibald. He was still thinking about Archibald and Davies as he wandered out to the lawn to find Dennis. Dennis was out on the lawn putting the finishing touches on what looked to be a fairly extensive obstacle course. Clara and Boudica were there with him. Clara was laying out hoops on the grass while Boudica watched and munched on a croissant. Good morning, Oliver, Dennis said. How do you feel today, ready for the tests? I am feeling good, Oliver said, putting on an animated display of stretching. With any luck, you will give me a clean bill of health after this. Dennis chuckled softly and said, I hope so. Then we better get started. Dennis led Oliver away from the obstacle course and back into the house. They began with simple tests of strength and motion. Oliver went up and down the stairs, lifted items over his head and placed them on shelves, wrote a letter dictated to him by Dennis, did up buttons on a shirt and then unbuttoned them again, untied his shoes and then tied them again, and made a few beds in the ward he'd been staying in. Dennis followed him around making notes on a clipboard, but not offering much feedback. This is not exactly what I had expected, Oliver admitted, as he finished tucking in the corners on the third bed. Possibly not, Dennis said, but it is important for me to be able to assess how much of your fine motor control has returned. Am I doing well? Oliver asked. He felt like he was. His penmanship hadn't quite reached its previous level, and he had fumbled a little more with the buttons than he had hoped, but he hoped these had gone unnoticed. We shall see, Dennis said evasively as he examined Oliver's work and made another note on his clipboard. I think we are ready to go to the final test. Let us go back outside. The pair walked back through the house and out onto the green grass. Oliver breathed in the fresh air. He was still feeling good physically, but he was starting to get nervous. How much longer would he have to stay if Dennis failed him? His nerves weren't helped by the sight of everyone standing around waiting for him. Even Mrs. Thomas and Longwood had turned out to watch. About time you showed up, Boudica called out. I was starting to wonder if Dennis had failed you already. My bet was on the handwriting. The note you sent me the other day looks like it was written by a toddler. I was unaware that this was going to be such a spectator event, Oliver said. I told you I was coming to watch, Archibald said enthusiastically while clapping Oliver on the back. We came out to help see you through to a full recovery. The least we can do is to give you a few proper cheers while you are out on the course. Oliver actually felt quite touched. He hadn't really considered that everyone had come here to support him. He had been afraid of inconveniencing everyone and had been so wrapped up in his experience. It wasn't until now, with everyone lined up, that he realized how much help it had been to him that they were there. Humphrey walked over and put a steadying hand on Oliver's shoulder. Do not be nervous, he said. You are going to do fine. You are ready for it. Oliver nodded and looked towards Dennis. Time to get started, he said. The obstacle course was challenging. It would have been difficult even before Oliver had been cursed. It was a mix of physical and magical challenges. Oliver was soon jumping between hoops, running, climbing, and even swinging on ropes over a sandy pit that someone had conjured. While he progressed from obstacle to obstacle, Oliver used his magic to help him. He transfigured a pile of rocks into pillows before jumping down from a high height, summoned a rope to him before swinging across a gap, and apparated precisely across the top of high blocks. It was a lot of work, but Oliver pushed himself to keep going as quickly as possible. The sound of his heavy breathing drowned out the occasional cheers of support that came from the watching crowd. Gradually, he completed one obstacle after the other, willing himself forward until he reached the final challenge. It was a simple run, laps and laps around the house and along the nearby cliffs. Oliver quickly developed a stitch in his side that made his breath catch in his chest. His heart pounded much too hard and much too quickly. His legs burned, but Oliver wouldn't stop. He wanted to throw up, and when nobody was watching, he aimed for a bush behind the house and let it fly, but he didn't stop running. Dennis had set up a finishing line and was waiting, clipboard in hand, when Oliver finished. Oliver felt hands patting him on the back as he doubled over, trying to catch his breath. He could feel his heart beating furiously, trying to break through his ribs. Sweat poured off his face, and his body felt much too hot. He vomited again to a chorus of groans and a few scattered whoops from the assembled group, but he felt better. Humphrey pulled out his wand and vanished away the sick from the ground. He was smiling at Oliver. Oliver smiled back. Boudica handed Oliver a glass of water. "That was a disgusting display," she said. "Here, I think you need this." Oliver straightened up, drank half the glass in one go, and dumped the rest over his head. Then he turned to look at Dennis, who was studying his clipboard and making some final notes. He flipped through a few pages and looked thoughtful. "Well, what is the final verdict?" Boudica asked. "Did he pass? Surely throwing up at the end like that is an instant fail." Dennis tapped his clipboard against his leg and looked at Oliver, who was still breathing heavily. He spoke slowly and deliberately. "It is my professional assessment that the patient is ready for discharge." A small cheer went up from the assembled group. Oliver could feel hands on his shoulders and back again. He could hear words of congratulation, and he could see Archibald shaking hands with Dennis. "Thank you," Oliver said to Dennis, when Dennis looked over. Dennis nodded in reply. "Well done, Oliver," he said. "You are free to leave at any time, but as it is getting late in the afternoon, I wonder if you all might like to stay one more night. In celebration, I think we could arrange a special dinner." There was a general babble of agreement, and together they all went back into the house, Oliver suddenly feeling a little lighter than he had before. The dinner that night was exquisite. Mrs. Thomas and the house elves pulled out all the stops and produced food of a quality that Oliver wasn't sure was even possible. Having cleaned himself up and being ravenously hungry, Oliver didn't say much, but rather listened as his companions shared stories and idle gossip about the ministry. The room was warm and bright. It was full of energy and life and friendship. For at least one more night, the world was okay. Chapter 24. The Archive Again. The next morning was a busy one. Everyone rushed around packing and searching for personal effects that had wandered around the house. Oliver carefully packed his own case, but since he had spent so much time working with Dennis, his items hadn't traveled far, and he was done much earlier than the others. He took a last look around the light and airy ward where he had stayed during his recovery, and was about to leave when Dennis walked in. "Ah, good," he said. "I hope to find you here for a quick word before you leave." "Thank you again," Oliver said, "for everything. There were times when I did not believe I would ever be able to walk out of here as a healthy person again." "Do not mention it," Dennis said with a smile and a wave of his hand, "but I do want to talk to you about your recovery." "What is it?" Oliver asked. "You may have noticed that some of your skills have not yet returned to their normal levels of proficiency," Dennis said. "You are ready for release, but you are not yet completely recovered. You will need to continue to work on those points." "I understand," Oliver said. Dennis continued. "For now, you will find that you tire more quickly than you did before, and that your hand is not as steady as it was. Do not allow this to discourage you, as it is normal and expected. These weaknesses will not be permanent if you continue to work at them. Practice your handwriting and your spellcasting. Exercise your body and mind to build up your strength and resilience." "I will," Oliver said. Do you have any suggestions for how to do that? Dennis pulled a folded-up piece of parchment from his pocket. There are some exercises here, he said, while opening it up to show it to Oliver. These will target the areas in which you are still somewhat deficient. I have also included a suggested schedule for you to do them. Some of them can be done daily or even more often, while others need only to be done a few times per week. If you are diligent with these exercises, you will continue to improve and recover. If you are not diligent with them, then the final stage of your recovery will be longer and more difficult than it otherwise needs be. Oliver took the parchment and looked at it carefully. Most of these appear to be the exercises we did together, he said. Well, no, all of them are exercises that we did together except that last one. Run as far as you can. Exactly, Dennis said. There are diagrams to help you if you cannot remember how to do them, but everything here should be familiar to you. As I said, diligence with these is the key to your ongoing recovery process. Then I will do my best to follow these recommendations to the letter, Oliver said, extending his hand. Thank you again for saving my life. You are welcome, Dennis said as he shook Oliver's hand. Come then, let us see if we can help the others. I believe I heard Archibald moaning about the state of his study room. Dennis led Oliver through the house until they reached the door of the room Archibald had commandeered for ongoing research. Oliver hadn't really had an opportunity to visit this room during his stay here. He was often too engaged in his work with Dennis to have any time to help with research. He knew Clara had spent time here helping in his place, but that was nearly all he knew. Through the door, though, he could hear Archibald's excited voice. Oliver opened the door and was immediately stunned at what he saw. There were shelves of books everywhere, and everywhere else there were stacks of books, parchment, maps, writing and cataloging tools, magnifying glasses, and several pairs of spectacles. Oliver looked at Dennis with surprise in his face. I know you like history, Oliver said, but you seem to be well stocked in this room. Oh, none of this is mine, Dennis said amiably. I emptied this room for Archibald and Humphrey shortly after they arrived. All of this is theirs. He smiled in an easygoing way as he stared into the room. Oh, Oliver, Archibald shouted across the room once he noticed him coming in. Good, good. I am glad you are here. I could use your help packing all this up. Did you bring the entire archive with you? Oliver asked incredulously. Of course not, Archibald responded. Do not be silly. We only brought sources with relevant Arthurian or Merlin-related information, or ties to them, or information relevant to the Isle of Man. And we also needed other sources from similar time periods to compare against. And of course, we had to bring along information about locations we might need to visit next. We had to guess a little on that front, so we ended up casting a rather wider net than we might have needed to do. We could not take chances that the very volume we needed was something we left behind, you know. Okay, Oliver said, cutting Archibald off. He pulled out his wand. I can help you pack this away. Where is it going? What are you doing with that? Put your wand away, Archibald ordered. We need to check these back in manually before we put them back into the trunk. He gestured to a trunk that occupied a small plot of the floor against one of the walls. Surely not, Oliver said. That will take an age. It must be done, Archibald demanded. I cannot lose any of these records that are under my care and protection. They must all be accounted for until they are returned to the archive. Oliver stared out at the shelves and stacks of books everywhere. There was no way they were going to finish this today. I have been at this most of last night and started again early this morning, Archibald continued, ignoring the dismay on Oliver's face. We only need to finish work on stacks BB through HBZ and shelves 13.2 through 47.1. Good luck, Dennis said with a smile and a friendly pat on Oliver's back. I am needed elsewhere. Oliver wanted to call out, Do not leave me here, as Dennis walked away, but he stifled it. Fortunately, he was rescued by the sudden appearance of Humphrey and Clara, who pushed past him into the room. Humphrey immediately pulled out his wand and began moving the shelves and piles into the trunk. "Wait," Archibald started. "We cannot," Humphrey interrupted. "We have imposed on the hospitality of our friends for long enough, and we do need to leave today if we are going to resume our search. We can enlist your archive aides to help us verify that everything we checked out is still with us. If anything is missing, I promise that I will personally return here to retrieve it." Archibald grumbled in a mutinous way and stalked off among the remaining shelves. "Does that mean we are going back to Oxford?" Oliver asked. "It does," Humphrey said. "Does Davies live in Oxford?" Clara asked. "He does not," Humphrey said. "He lives in Glasgow, but he has not yet responded to my owl. He may be on another expedition and unable to receive or respond to my request. For now, we will need to proceed as if we will not have his help. The sooner we can return to Oxford, the sooner we can resume our work." He was silent for a moment as he concentrated on moving a precariously tottering pile of parchments across the room and into the trunk. "Oliver," he said when they had been safely lowered into it, "would you please assist me with this, quickly and carefully?" Oliver raised his wand, and together he and Humphrey packed the trunk with all of the archive materials left in the room. As the shelves disappeared, Archibald appeared, sitting moodily on a chair against the opposite wall. But he didn't try to stop them again. Instead, he watched as his treasured archive records were packed up and grumbled softly to himself about his incomplete checklist. The rest of the packing went smoothly, and before Oliver knew it, they were gathered together outside and ready to leave. Oliver, Clara, and Boudica had their own personal small cases in their hands, while Humphrey and Archibald were carrying the large trunk from the study between them. Oliver supposed that they had also stashed their personal belongings in it for convenience. Of course, Humphrey and Archibald were so dedicated to their research and work that, if he hadn't seen them with a change of clothes each day, Oliver wouldn't have put it past either of them to have not brought any personal luggage at all. "Well, this is goodbye then," Humphrey said, looking around at the group. "Thank you very kindly for your exceptional hospitality." He extended his hand to Mrs. Thomas and Dennis in turn. "We have been very fortunate indeed that you were able to help young Oliver and that you have shared in our little adventure." "The pleasure was ours," Mrs. Thomas said. "You are welcome back any time." Humphrey thanked them again and began to rummage in his pockets with his spare hand. "I have made arrangements with the ministry," he said absent-mindedly. "We will take a portkey from here to the archive. It will be much safer and much less conspicuous if we do not need to carry this large trunk through the streets. However, I cannot recall what I have done with the portkey." "I have it here," Longwood said, stepping forward and holding out a hoop like the ones that Oliver had used in the obstacle course the day previous. Oliver noticed that he didn't seem to have any luggage with him. "Longwood is staying," Boudica said, noticing the question Oliver was about to ask. "Someone needs to help Dennis keep an eye on the forge. If the group that attacked you comes back, Longwood can report it, and a rapid response team can be there within moments." Oliver nodded. "Good luck," he said. "Same to you," Longwood said. "I think you have the more difficult task now." He turned back to Humphrey. "If you are ready, I can set the enchantment," he offered. "Wonderful," Humphrey said. "I think we are all prepared." Longwood tapped the hoop with his wand. "You have about 1 minute now," he said. Humphrey took the portkey with his spare hand and held it out in front of him. Everyone gathered round it and reached out to touch it. It was good that the portkey was so big, since Archibald and Humphrey still had the trunk suspended between them and could only reach out with their free hands. Oliver had offered to help carry it, but Archibald had waved him off. Apparently they had bewitched it to be as light as a feather, but more importantly, Archibald would not cede the responsibility for the security of his archive materials to anyone else. They all stood around in a circle, quietly waiting. Longwood had a pocket watch in his hand now and was watching it. "About 30 seconds now," he said. Oliver swayed gently, shuffling his feet in the grass. He could see Archibald readjusting his grip on the trunk and Clara's hand flexing as it held on to the hoop. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oliver felt the jerk of the portkey as his feet left the ground. He felt them spinning faster and faster, and then his feet hit the ground, and they were standing once again in the entrance hall to the Wizarding Archive. "Welcome to the Wizarding Archive," droned the witch at the counter with her croaky voice. "Visitors, please sign in at the desk." The group slowly filed through the counter, signing in on the guest register. Boudica was at the back of the line, and once she had signed in, the group set off for Archibald's office. "There is not much we can do until Davies responds," Humphrey was saying to Archibald. "We can keep looking through the records," Archibald responded. "We can go to any rumored location of the coronation of Arthur. I am certain we would recognize the location instantly once we were there." It seemed to Oliver that Archibald was determined to find the answers buried in his stacks of books and papers. "We could do that, and we may waste many more days in the attempt and still not discover the hill we saw in the memory," Humphrey responded. "This is the logical course of action. We only need to show Davies the beginning of the memory so he can have a good look at the landscape. If he knows where it is, he can save us a lot of time and effort. If he does not know where it is, we will not have lost anything." Archibald grumbled. "This Davies," Boudica said, turning to Oliver. "Any idea who he is? I have never heard of him before." "No," said Oliver. "He is supposed to be some adventurer, I think. At least that is what Humphrey said at breakfast the other day." "Archibald does not seem to like him very much," Clara observed. "I asked him about that," Oliver said. "He would not give me a straight answer. It sounds like there is some history there." "Or maybe Archibald just does not like that someone else might be able to answer a question when he cannot," Clara said. "I have seen a few professional rivalries here at Oxford. Ego is a strong motivator." "Any chance this Davies is related to the Davies in the Auror office?" Oliver asked Boudica. "I doubt it," Boudica said. "Davies is Muggle-born, and he does not seem to have a lot of family. The name is also not that uncommon." When the group arrived at Archibald's office, he opened the door to let them in. No sooner had everyone walked in than he and Humphrey picked up one of Archibald's bags and walked back out the door. "We had better start checking in all of the materials we took out of the archive," Archibald said. "I will call a few aides to help us sort through everything." "Do we need to?" Clara started, but Boudica cut across her. "Great, Clara and I can help Oliver," she said. "Dennis gave him a list of exercises to do to help him keep recovering. We should seize any opportunity to make sure he does them and gets back to full health." She smiled in an innocently helpful sort of way. "Oh yes, of course," said Humphrey. "That will be a good use of your time. We are now waiting on Davies' return owl, of course. Just be ready to go whenever it comes." With that, Humphrey and Archibald marched off down the corridor again. "Were you serious about helping Oliver?" Clara asked. "I was serious about helping all of us avoid cataloging a whole room full of stuff with those two," Boudica said. "But I suppose this is a good time for Oliver to practice his penmanship. We could have him write lines, maybe something like, 'I will not be boring.'" "You would think that was a terrible punishment," Oliver said. At that moment, an owl swooped in through the open doorway. It landed on the desk and held out its leg towards Boudica. She looked at it with surprise and took a small letter that was tied onto it. The owl sat and waited. "Interesting," Boudica said, reading the letter. "It looks like there has been a sighting, and we have a lead on the Black Hand." She handed the letter over to Clara to read. "They want you to go," Clara asked after she had finished reading, and passed the letter to Oliver. "They want my help. I guess that means I am off." She paused, looking at the owl. "Oliver, would you turn that over and write 'on my way' on the back for me? It turns out I am helping you with your exercises after all." Oliver gave Boudica a sarcastic laugh, scribbled on the back, and tossed the letter back to her. She tied it back onto the owl, and it promptly took off through the door. "Send me an owl if you hear from Davies before I get back," Boudica said on her way out. "I do not want to miss the show when he and Archibald get together." No sooner had Boudica left than two more owls swooped in. One, a rather businesslike barn owl, dropped a roll of parchment on Archibald's desk and without stopping went right back out the door. The other, a large eagle owl, landed near Clara and held out its leg, on which was tied a small pouch. Clara reached out to look at it. "You know, this is a very strange way to send mail," she said. "Is it?" Oliver mused. "The letters are always delivered to the right place and delivered quickly. Owls are just better homing pigeons." Clara opened the pouch and pulled a note out of it. The owl seemed to think its job was done, and it took off and flew back out the door. "What about a post office and a mail carrier?" Clara asked, waving the note at Oliver. "Then a person could come in and say, 'Mail for you, sir. I ave a lair air for Humphrey. Would thar be you? Very good, sir.' 'Good day, sir.'" She marched about and put on an accent as she handed the letter to Oliver. Oliver laughed. "You know very well that we have a post office," he said. "The prices for owl delivery are very reasonable, since purchasing a good owl for yourself can be very expensive." Clara rolled her eyes. "Both of these are for Humphrey," Oliver said, turning the note over in his hand. It was folded up, but Humphrey's name was written on the front. "It does not say who it is from, though, at least on the outside. Let us hope it is this Davies fellow." "What about that other one?" Clara asked. "It is definitely from the ministry," Oliver said. "It has the ministry's seal on it. We can take these and go take them to him. I suppose owls are not permitted further into the archive." "Where did they go?" Clara asked. "They went out the door, but they did not say where they were going." "I am sure it cannot be difficult to find them," Oliver said. "They must have gone down to the archive floor to return everything they took with them to the Isle of Man." Oliver took up the letters, and he and Clara went back out of the office. They walked down the hall until they reached a corner. Turning the corner, they found another long hall. Here and there they passed doors with little name placards. Oliver didn't recognize many of them, but there were a few that he knew. "That witch wrote one of the textbooks I used in school," Oliver pointed out to Clara at one of them. "It was the book I used in ancient runes." He paused, thinking back to the class. "It was not one of my favorite textbooks," he finished. "How bad could it have really been?" Clara asked. "Oh, it was horrendous," Oliver said. "It is probably considered a form of torture in more civilized places." "I have studied from many difficult textbooks," Clara said. "Surely you exaggerate." "It crushed your spirit," Oliver replied. "I have never encountered worse writing, more confusing explanations of a subject, and a deeply held dedication to destroying any semblance of brevity. If you were lucky, it merely confused and bored you." However, I knew several students who had panic attacks while trying to complete reading assignments. And poor Anthony Jacobson actually cried in class when he was asked to read from it. "You cannot be serious," Clara said, her voice showing that she wasn't sure if she should laugh or offer emotional support. "Oh, yes," Oliver said. "He just broke down on the spot. He was in absolute hysterics, could not be calmed down. He needed a calming draught from the hospital wing, if I am not mistaken. To be fair to Anthony, it was a rather long passage he was asked to read." "If it was so terrible, why did you use it at all?" Clara asked as they turned yet another corner. "Oh, it is the best book on the subject ever written. It is truly the seminal work on ancient runes, and any professor who is not using it would be a laughing stock. The students who make it through a course using that book are among the best educated students in the world, in the subject of ancient runes anyway. In fact, I believe the author received an Order of Merlin after completing it," Oliver said. "Was it third class?" "The Order of Merlin?" Clara asked. "It is an award for notable accomplishments," Oliver said. It is fairly prestigious, but has been awarded frivolously in the past, so it can be difficult to flaunt around. It would be a little like being knighted." "That sounds familiar," Clara said. "Why does it sound familiar?" "What sounds familiar? Being asked to study from one of the worst books ever written, which also happens to be one of the best subject material studies in history," Oliver asked. "That does not seem like an especially common experience, but I suppose you have spent a lot of time in school." "No," Clara said with a chuckle. "Of course not. Well, to be honest, I studied from plenty of books and more than a few professors that were highly regarded in their fields. They also happened to be dull, tedious, and remarkably poor educators." Oliver nodded knowingly. "That is not the point," Clara said. "Where do I know the Order of Merlin from?" "Do you remember when we were back on the train leaving Oxford and we had just met?" Oliver asked. Clara nodded. "When I was showing you the notes Archibald, Humphrey, and I put together, there was a bit in there about the Order of Merlin," he continued. "You picked it out immediately. Do you remember what you said?" "No, not really," Clara replied. "So much has happened since then, it feels like a lifetime ago." "That is fair," Oliver said. "And what you said was probably more meaningful to me than it was to you at the time." "Well, you were not being completely honest about what you were doing," Clara interjected. "Indeed," Oliver said. "I recall it having to do with some minor wizarding law and me not wanting to go to prison for the rest of my earthly existence." Oliver gave a little mock bow and continued. "You said that this version of Merlin would hide things so that only a wizard like him who was working with a non-wizard like Arthur could find them. That stuck with me, and that is why I went back to ask for your help in Launceston." Oliver could see Clara walking along next to him and smiling. They walked along in silence a little longer before making one more turn. "It seems strange to me that all of these hallways have only had left turns," Clara said. "We have never even had the chance of going right." "True, but I suppose that makes it difficult to get lost," Oliver said. "Oh, look, stairs." Just around that last corner, there was a staircase that led down from the hall and opened up onto the archive floor. At the bottom was a small foyer with 4 desks in it. The desks had a few papers scattered on top of them, and one of them had an open book. Little name tags sat on each one. "Is there supposed to be someone here?" Clara asked. "Upstairs, we would have some library aides stationed here to help guide students or researchers. You would know, since that is where we first met." Oliver shrugged. "We went a different way to get to the reading room before," he said. "Honestly, if you told me Archibald and the witch at the front desk were the only 2 people in this whole place, I would have believed you." He looked at the nearest desk. There was a little sign placed neatly in the corner facing Oliver so he could read it. "Ring bell for service," he read aloud. "Do you see a bell?" "Oh, here it is," Clara said, finding a small handbell on one of the other desks. It made a clear and gentle tone when she rang it. Initially, nothing happened, but then they could faintly hear a soft wheezing. It steadily grew louder until a wizard appeared. "How can I help you?" he wheezed. "Are you all right?" Clara asked. "Should you sit down?" "I am fine," the wizard responded, leaning on the desk. His face was red and puffy. "I have reactions like this when I am exposed to high quantities of dust. Working in an archive is not always ideal, but I do enjoy it. It will get better now that I am away from the worst of it." "Oh, I see," Clara said, clearly still concerned. "Is there nothing you can do to ease your symptoms?" "They will pass with time," the wizard said between heavy wheezes. "A potion of yarrow, nettles, and buckthorn would be recommended by the healers, but unfortunately I am a rather hopeless potioneer. I am more likely to melt a cauldron than successfully brew even the most basic of potions." He paused to catch his breath. "Sorry, I am getting off topic. How can I help you?" "We are looking for Archibald and Humphrey," Oliver said. "I work with Humphrey at the ministry, and Archibald has been helping us with a project recently." "Oh, of course," the wizard said. "He is just down this way. He pointed, and then gestured for Oliver and Clara to follow him. Archibald took a lot of materials with him when he left. He has us triple-checking everything to make sure it has all come back. He is in room 3 doing that work right now. The red-faced wizard continued to wheeze as he walked them through aisles of boxes and books. He did not look back and walked in front of them without further conversation. Privately, Oliver wondered if the wizard would be capable of walking and talking in his current state. As the wizard had not yet collapsed or passed out, though Oliver decided it was best to let him manage his problem on his own. They reached the door of a room on one of the outer walls. A plaque on the wall said, "Reading Room 3," and underneath in bold red letters it said, "Reserved." "Here we are," said the wizard, who finally sounded as though he was breathing a little easier. "I will let you go in on your own. I think it may be better for me to wait a little longer before I go back in." "Of course," Oliver said, reaching for the door. "Thank you." He opened the door and was immediately greeted by a thick dust cloud. He coughed and turned away. Clara was standing a little further back and ducked for cover. Oliver stepped back and took a few lungfuls of clean air. He and Clara exchanged curious looks. "What could have caused all this?" Clara asked. "I saw what Archibald had in his room at Denny's. It was dusty, but not like this." "I have no idea," Oliver said. "I suppose we had better go in and see what those two have gotten up to." "No, wait a moment," he said, pulling out his wand. He conjured 2 clean handkerchiefs and gave one to Clara. "This should help a little bit," he said, covering his mouth and nose with the clean cloth. He stepped into a room that was choked with dust. Oliver could only see a few feet in front of him. The dust stung his eyes, and he had to squint to see anything. Shadows in the dust told him there were shelves all around him. He pushed forward towards the middle of the room, trying to avoid coughing or breathing too deeply. Voices carried out towards him. "I cough cannot, cough see, cough it. Cough well we, cough need to, cough find it to, cough stop this." "I found it," said a third voice, further back in the room. However, this was soon followed by a disappointed series of hacking coughs and a choked, "Lost it." Oliver walked towards the sounds of the voices, but he was hit in the face by something hard. He stumbled back and looked around wildly. All he could see was dust and shadows, and then suddenly he became aware that something was touching him. He swatted at it, but missed. It came back and landed on his head. Quickly it moved down to his shoulders and back. Oliver turned around, swinging his arms wildly, but it eluded him. Clara emerged from the dust. Her eyes were narrowed against the dust. "There's something here," Oliver choked out at her, still looking for whatever had just hit him. "It ran into me, and I could feel it on me, but then I lost it." He pulled out his wand. They peered into the dust, and then Oliver felt it again on the leg of his trousers. It was moving up towards his stomach. He looked down and was surprised to see a feather duster brushing his midriff and emitting copious quantities of dust into the air. He pointed his wand down at it and muttered, "Finite incantatum." The feather duster immediately stopped and fell with a soft whump to the floor. "Got it," Oliver said. He stowed his wand and reached down to pick up the duster. He showed it to Clara. "I wonder what this is about." A sneeze came from just in front of them, followed by an exclamation of, "Oh, I cannot see a thing. Wilbur, if we ever find the door, I am going to demote you." "Of course, sir," came a feeble reply from further back. Oliver and Clara walked a little further into the room before they quite literally bumped into Archibald. "Looking for this?" Oliver asked, holding up the now limp duster. "Well done, lad," Archibald exclaimed, followed by a coughing fit. He reached out and Oliver handed him the duster. Humphrey emerged next to him, looking bleary-eyed. "Door?" he asked. "This way," Oliver said, and he and Clara turned around to walk back the way they had come. They walked out the door and into the clean air of the main room. All 4 of them were covered in a thick layer of dust. "What was that all about?" Oliver asked. Archibald just muttered furiously, under his breath between coughs. A few other figures stumbled out the door and gasped at the clean air. One of them, a wiry wizard, slumped to the ground next to the door. A witch who had followed him out gave him a dirty look and said, "You witless, lazy idiot. If intelligence was water, you would die of thirst. You bought that off the street in Diagon Alley without a demonstration, without a single question, and without a single thought. Of course the spell was poor. Why should it not spew dust into the air?" She stood over the hapless figure and brushed some of the dust off her front onto his head. "You utter, pointless fool," she yelled and huffed away. "I will deal with you later," Archibald growled. "After you clean up that mess, no magic." The little figure of Wilbur shrank back against the wall, and he nodded. Humphrey had been doubled over, breathing deeply. "Thank you for your timely assistance," he managed to sputter, while steering Oliver and Clara away from the sorry Wilbur. "What brought you down to us?" Oliver held up the letters and handed them to Humphrey. "Oh, good," Humphrey said. "Here is a daily report from the ministry, and the other is from Davies." He opened the letter from Davies first. Yes. Wonderful," he said aloud as he read. "Davies will receive us tomorrow evening, so we can stay here for the remainder of the day. I, for one, would not say no to an opportunity to get cleaned up." Archibald appeared at Humphrey's side. "Oh, yes, I should say so." He shook his head, and a little cloud of dust rained down around him. "We cannot continue to work in this state. Imagine the contamination we would bring to the other pieces of our collection if we viewed them in this state." He stood there with his hands on his hips and a disgusted look etched on his face. His eyes darted in the direction of Wilbur again. "I am glad that we are in agreement," said Humphrey, trying to bring Archibald's attention back. "In addition, Oliver and I will need accommodations for the night. The archive is furnished with living quarters for visiting academics," Archibald said in a somewhat distracted way. "Some of them spend months at a time here, buried in their research before publishing. It is not the height of luxury, but it is comfortable enough." He seemed to snap back to the moment. "But of course, yes, let us get you to your rooms and all cleaned up." Clara interjected, "Sorry, may I also have a room accommodation for the night? I trust that it will not be an inconvenience." "Of course," Archibald said. "We have plenty of available rooms at the moment. If you wish to stay, we are happy to oblige." "I was under the impression that you live here in Oxford," Humphrey said. "Apologies, but I presumed that you would rather return home and sleep in your own bed." "Normally, I would," Clara said. "However, as far as my family knows, I am in Launceston. It would be difficult to explain my sudden return, and my father would not approve of me traveling about the countryside with men he does not know. In order to avoid awkward questions, I do not wish to be seen by anyone I know." It would be difficult for Clara to offer any explanation of her presence that did not betray our mission or break the Statute of Secrecy, Oliver added. "I see," Humphrey said. "Once again, my apologies. There are some cultural differences between the magical and non-magical worlds that we wizards struggle to understand. Our young witches and wizards are afforded much more personal freedom than you seem to be accustomed to." "I will have Percy show you to the dormitories," Archibald said. "He escaped the dust early enough that he should be sufficiently recovered now. Percy, where did he get to?" The wheezy wizard emerged from behind a nearby shelf. "Here," he called out. His face was still swollen, but to Oliver it did seem to be getting better. The wheezing, at any rate, wasn't quite as loud as it had been. "Good," Archibald said. "Take our guests to the dormitories so they can get cleaned up, and then go get yourself cleaned up. We will need to complete our work, but not until that room is fit for purpose." A scowl ran across his face as he looked at Wilbur again. "I will meet you later for dinner," Archibald said, "after I deal with this senseless specimen." Percy led the three away into the archive. Looking back, Oliver could see Archibald brandishing the duster like a sword. Each movement caused a little cascade of dust from his body. They followed Percy back to the foyer and desks where Oliver and Clara had first met him, and then up the stairs to the corridors above. Percy turned to lead them further along when Oliver stopped him. "Wait a moment," he said. "All of our bags are back at Archibald's office. We may want to retrieve them." "I can handle that," Humphrey said. He extended his wand and said firmly, "Accio luggage." The little group stood there in silence, waiting. Humphrey with his wand outstretched and a placid look on his face. "Did it work?" Clara whispered to Oliver. "Nothing happened." "Yes, it did," Oliver said. "That is the summoning charm. It still takes the items time to fly from one location to the other. Did we close the door behind us?" "We did," Clara responded. "Why?" "The door was closed, Humphrey," Oliver said. Turning back to Clara, he explained, "Our bags are still solid objects, and the door is in the way. The objects will come to you around corners, but bags do not open doors." "Not to worry," Humphrey said, his wand still outstretched. "I think my summoning charm was sufficiently strong to best Archibald's office door. I believe our bags' arrival is imminent." Sure enough, a moment later, 3 bags came flying around the corner. "Catch them," Humphrey exclaimed, as the bags hurtled towards them. Oliver caught a bag as it careened into his stomach. He caught a glimpse of Clara throwing her arms up to stop another from hitting her in the face. Looking the other direction, Humphrey had actually been knocked down and sent flying several feet backwards by his bag. "Wonderful," Humphrey said as he got back to his feet. "That is the downside to such a strong summoning spell, but it got them through the door." He looked at the bag at his feet. "Now, who does this belong to? Is it yours, Oliver?" he asked, picking it up and holding it out to Oliver. "Oh, Clara, I believe that one is mine." "Thank you," Humphrey said as he took his own bag from Clara. Once everyone had their own bag, Humphrey turned back to Percy, still puffy and wheezy. "Lead the way, Percy," Humphrey ordered. They set off down the hallway to the left. This took them in the opposite direction of Humphrey's office. After a few minutes of walking, they arrived at a short corridor. A single door at the end of it opened up to a large, circular room. A round fireplace stood in the center of the room, surrounded by comfortable-looking couches and armchairs. On the outside of the room were more doors. "Here we are," Percy said. "Humphrey is here in the first room. Oliver, you have the second there on the left, and Clara, you will be in the first over on this other side." Percy pointed to each room in turn. "Everything you need should be inside. Please let any of the archival assistants know if you need anything." "Thank you, Percy," Humphrey said. "I am sure we can manage from here." They each headed to their own rooms. Oliver found his to be spacious and comfortable. An enchanted window opened up to a field shadowed in the purple light of a summer evening. A doorway on the side of the room led to a washroom. He set his bag down and went to get cleaned up. A short time later, a refreshed Oliver walked back out to the common area. Humphrey was already there, sitting in an armchair in front of the fireplace. A small fire crackled gently. Oliver grabbed the chair next to him and sat in silence. Humphrey had a faraway look to him. After a minute of silence, Humphrey said, "Penny for your thoughts, Oliver." "Are you sure?" Oliver asked. "It seemed to me that you were the one deep in thought." "I was," Humphrey said. "However, I have examined my own thoughts, and now I am curious about yours." "What do you want to know?" Oliver asked. "How have you found this little adventure of ours?" Humphrey inquired. "It is quite a different challenge than what we usually deal with." "It is different," Oliver said. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "There are things that I have enjoyed, to be honest. I prefer investigating a ruin to writing a report about one." He gave Humphrey a sideways glance. "It is not that I do not enjoy our work," he said hurriedly. "That is not the point." "I understand," Humphrey cut across. "I was a younger man once. Even now I feel the call for action. I believe it runs deep in our bones, deeper even than the magic in our blood." Humphrey paused, and they sat in silence for a moment. Oliver could see that Humphrey had not finished his thought, and he did not interrupt. Not everyone enjoys the reality of an adventure, Humphrey continued at length. There is hard work and struggle before there can be any sort of reward. There are dangers to be faced and lessons to be learned. At times there are debts of pain to be paid. He nodded towards Oliver. Oliver nodded once, but still did not speak. There is no shame in preferring the safety of home, Humphrey said. Archibald is one who does not crave adventurous experience. He loves his books and his relics and his comfortable bed. Is that so bad? No, I suppose not, Oliver responded. I do not think that I am like that, though. No, I should not think so, Humphrey mused. I see that you have the need to do. I cannot imagine doing nothing now, Oliver said. Knowing what we know, having seen what we have seen, and having discovered what we have discovered, we have to go on. Indeed, we are compelled forward, Humphrey said. If not for the sake of discovery, then for the promise I made to the minister. And if not for that, then for the sake of the world and all those who will shortly suffer. What do you mean? Humphrey looked sad and tired and old. He held out a letter. Oliver saw that it was the ministry's daily report that Humphrey had not opened earlier. My boy, he said heavily, the German Empire is mobilizing their armies. War will spread and engulf this continent, perhaps more than that. Whatever we do, war is coming. Oliver looked silently into the fire. So everything we have done, he said quietly, it did not matter at all. Is that what you think? Humphrey asked quietly. Perhaps, Oliver said. He hesitated. I do not want that to be true, though. They fell into silence and stared into the fire. Oliver didn't know how long he was lost in his thoughts before Clara emerged from her room. She seemed pleased about something and was grinning. Do you know how fortunate you are? She asked as she walked over to them. Excuse me, Oliver said, thoroughly confused. In what way? I have just had a bath, Clara said matter-of-factly. The most remarkable bath of my entire life. She started to get excited. The water was the perfect temperature and stayed that way. I am sure I could still be sitting there, and it would not have lost 1 degree of temperature. Oh, and the bubbles. Clara was becoming extremely animated now. There was a bottle that, when mixed with the water, produced the most remarkable blue and purple bubbles. They floated around me and danced on top of the water. They did not fade into the water, but stayed there. And when one of them burst, it released a wonderful scent of lavender into the room. She stood there with her eyes closed, suddenly still and silent as the memory of the experience washed over her. Then Clara spoke again, and the whole time I watched the most remarkable sunset out of my window. She opened her eyes and looked down at Oliver and Humphrey. I know full well that the sun was not setting during my bath. This life, with magic your life, it is just the most incredible thing. Humphrey smiled and waved his wand so that an empty chair glided gently into place next to him. Have a seat, he said to Clara. We are often guilty of forgetting to marvel at the wonders around us. It may be that the most fortunate thing of all is that you are here to remind us of them. Clara sat down and sighed. Without magic, Oliver would have had to carry this chair over here. Even Oliver had to smile. His mood improved again as Archibald appeared at the entrance to the room. It is not perhaps to the standard of cooking that we have become accustomed to while staying with Dennis, he said, but I thought you all might want a little something to eat. A few of Archibald's assistants followed him into the room carrying trays of sandwiches and pasties. Humphrey summoned a small round table from across the room and then rearranged their chairs around it. A jug of butterbeer and 4 pint glasses emerged from somewhere. We have rarely taken the opportunity to sit down and talk, Humphrey said. We have always been wrapped up in our adventure. Tonight, I believe we can set that aside for a few moments. Oliver reached for the jug and began pouring it into the glasses. Clara was full of questions. She was curious about the wider wizarding world. She wanted to know more about magic, wizarding education, the Ministry of Magic, and everyday life for witches and wizards. For their part, Humphrey and Archibald were equally inquisitive about the Muggle world and Clara's life in it. Oliver had spent a great deal more time with Clara than the others, and he had already heard the answers to many of the questions asked by the others. However, he did ask some questions about the academic rigors of Clara's studies that prompted something of a lecture from Archibald about the shortcomings of wizarding education. They are supposed to be fully qualified wizards at 17, he said at one point. Many of them can barely read, much less reason. It was very late into the night, indeed, before the group finally rose to go to bed. As Davies will not be able to see us until the evening, there is no pressing need to rise particularly early, Humphrey told them. Archibald's assistants will leave breakfast here for us. Once we are ready, we can review our notes again, and I think we would all benefit from viewing the memory once more. Once they had all agreed, they split off to their separate rooms. As Oliver climbed into bed, he reflected on how far he'd come. It had been over a month since he and Humphrey had been tasked by Minister Evermond with tracking down whatever artifacts the Black Hand was trying to find. At that same time, the whole world had been changing. Armies were gathering and moving. The peace and tranquility of life was being swept away. The past already felt distant.